Chapter 43. Chu Yang restored the stone to its original state. When he walked out of the green jade door, the stone room was once again filled with a cold air. It looked the same as before. But Chu Yang knew that it was different. Even though this place was still Seven Shades congregation grounds, it lacked the spiritual energy of the Calamity Sword. In the Seven Shades congregation grounds, there were bound to be extremely cold treasures under the ground. This was a secret that Chu Yang had inadvertently discovered after he had arrived in the upper three heavens in his previous life. Chu Yang had already obtained the Calamity Sword, which was more important than anything else. Therefore, he did not covet the treasure that created Seven Shades congregation grounds. He would preserve this bit of energy for Beyond the Heavens sect. But the cold air he absorbed was almost the same as the cold air of Seven Shades congregation grounds over the past few decades. Even though it was absorbed by the Calamity Sword, Chu Yang could use it as he wished. It was no different from using his own martial arts. This was the special benefit of the Calamity Sword's master. Of course, if Beyond the Heavens sect was still unable to avoid destruction in the future, then Chu Yang would come and take away the unknown treasure that created Seven Shades congregation grounds. He would not let anyone else have it. When he walked out of the door, he could not help but be surprised. Meng Ran was still standing there with an indifferent expression. But how did Sect Master become a masked man? Plus, he was wrapped up so tightly that only his eyes could be seen. It seems that his eyes are a bit smaller, only a slit. When Chu Yang appeared, Meng Ran and Wu Yunliang both looked at him. At first glance, both of them had an inexplicable feeling at the same time. The Chu Yang of this moment is definitely different from before he went in. But what exactly was different, they could not tell. It was as if this was a very fleeting feeling. At the same time, Wu Yunliang also felt that Chu Yang was curiously sizing him up. He could not help but blush. "How is it?" The two asked at the same time. They spoke in unison. Chu Yang stayed in there for a full 6 hours. The two were already shocked beyond words. Generally, the longest time a disciple could stay in the Seven Shades congregation grounds was less than an hour before they had to come out immediately. Otherwise, they would be frozen to death by the extreme cold air. When he came out, his entire body was shivering and his face was covered in white frost. He looked like he was on his deathbed. However, Chu Yang had stayed inside for 6 hours. And he had come out as if nothing had happened. Both of them looked at Chu Yang as if they had seen a ghost. Chu Yang saw that his master and martial uncle were all staring at him. Their eyes didn't move at all. Not knowing what had happened, he could not help but touch his face subconsciously. If there was a mirror here, Chu Yang's first reaction would be to take it and see if there was a flower growing on his face. This gaze was too strange. Naturally, he didn't know the reaction of entering Seven Shades colony for the first time. What happened? "Are you all right?" The two of them asked in unison. "Nothing." Chu Yang was even more puzzled. The two of them looked at each other. Chu Yang could clearly see that Wu Yunliang's narrowed eyes suddenly widened. Meng Ran coughed a few times and asked seriously, "Ahem ahem ahem. Your great uncle means, how is your Seven Shades absolute palm?" "Nope. But I feel like I have absorbed a lot of cold energy." Chu Yang said in a daze, "Let me try." Wu Yunliang and Meng Ran were speechless. "Why did you go in?" Chu Yang channeled his energy. He deliberately channeled the cold energy stored in the Tribulation Sword in his dantian. Immediately, the stone room became cold as if it was winter. His outstretched right hand suddenly turned silver white. His left and right hands clapped together. Immediately, cold energy filled the air. He had only used 30%. However, Wu Yunliang and Meng Ran's eyes widened. How could this be? This was almost the 5th level of Seven Shades absolute palm. This was simply inconceivable. That day, when he used Seven Shades absolute palm, there was only a faint cold energy. It was clear that he had just started using Seven Shades absolute palm. He had not even reached the 1st level. But now, this cold chi was equivalent to reaching the 5th level in a single bound. This was equivalent to the sect leader's younger brother's decades of cultivation. If they knew that Chu Yang had only used 30% of his cold energy, what would they think? The two rubbed their eyes at the same time. Meng Qiaoran was even more shocked by his own disciple. He nonchalantly pinched Wu Yunliang's thigh. Wu Yunliang screamed. That part of his body was already bruised from the beating. Now that it was being twisted, the pain was bone-piercing. He hugged his thigh and jumped up. So it was not a dream. Meng Qiaoran smiled happily. He was very happy that his little brother had such an achievement. Wu Yunliang angrily looked at him. Does your thigh hurt? It doesn't hurt. Meng Qiaoran nonchalantly said, I just wanted to see if it was real. But you pinched my thigh. Wu Yunliang angrily said. We have been brothers for so many years. What's the difference between pinching you and pinching me? Meng Qiaoran laughed heartily. He walked forward and patted Chu Yang's shoulder. Not bad. You have made your master proud. Meng Qiaoran had always been mature and prudent. Normally he would not joke around like this. But right now, he was so happy that he lost his usual self. Wu Yunliang's face was full of anger, but his heart was very happy. It was as if he could see the little brother who had just entered the sect many years ago standing in front of him. He could not help but smile. You were able to absorb so much cold energy and go out on your own. I am relieved. Meng Qiaoran smiled and said to Chu Yang, but when you reach Iron Cloud, you must be as low-key as possible. Do not meddle in other people's business just because you have some skills. Especially when it comes to saving a beauty. If you can avoid it, don't do it. You must know that beauty is the source of disaster. Chu Yang solemnly agreed. Meng Qiaoran's words were indeed priceless advice. The hero saving the beauty repaying the hero with her body. This was something that every young man in Jianghu yearned for. However, this was also the path of death for too many martial artists. Those who dared to openly bully beautiful women were all powerful people. If they were not powerful, then their families were powerful. If you provoked those people and did not have a powerful background, then you could only wander the world to seek refuge. Chu Yang thought to himself, if I were to be like those little brats and do stupid things, then that would be a miracle. But I still don't understand. How can you absorb so much cold energy? Wu Yunliang interjected. His bruised eyes stared at Chu Yang. You are only a first-grade martial warrior. First-grade martial warrior? Chu Yang innocently opened his eyes and asked, what's wrong? Wu Yunliang was a little confused. His already round eyes almost fell out of their sockets. He remembered that when he saw him a few days ago, he was only a third-grade martial warrior. How did he rise like a rocket in just a few days? How could so many miracles happen in this little boy's body? Moreover, even if he was a first-grade martial warrior, after absorbing so much cold energy, his blood vessels would have been frozen into ice. How could this guy act as if nothing had happened? Looking at Chu Yang's innocent face, Wu Yunliang closed his mouth after a while. He rolled his eyes and said dejectedly, all right, I won't ask anymore. You can pretend as much as you want. I only hope that when you reach Iron Cloud, you can pretend like this. I won't fail to live up to your expectations. Chu Yang smiled. His face was full of honesty and sincerity. Wu Yunliang was speechless. Looking at this guy's honest and sincere face, he gritted his teeth and said, whoever believes your face is an idiot. If he were to believe your words, then that person would have already been sold. Chapter 44. After saying goodbye to Wu Yunliang, Meng Qiaoran walked back to Purple Bamboo Garden in silence. Chu Yang knew that Meng Qiaoran was worried about him, but he did not know what to do. He wanted to say something, but he felt that no matter what he said, it would be useless. He would not be able to dispel Meng Qiaoran's worries, so he kept his mouth shut. Just as they reached the entrance of Purple Bamboo Garden, they heard Tan Tan's piercing yell, "Don't run! If you run again, I will turn you into soup." Both of them were startled. They quickly went in and saw Tan Tan standing by the pond with his butt in the air, splashing water everywhere. Then he cheered and jumped up with a fish in his hand. Holding it above his head, he laughed heartily. Meng Qiaoran was surprised and rushed forward. Chu Yang was also surprised. He did not expect Tan Tan to catch such a good thing. It was a strange fish. Its whole body was black without scales. Its head was round and had no eyes. It was a blind fish. It wasn't big and weighed less than half a catty. Tan Tan put it down. Meng Chao Ran's voice was urgent. Don't kill it. Tan Tan turned his head with a perplexed look on his face. Then he excitedly shouted, Master, Chuyang, look. I caught a strange fish. As he was talking, the fish struggled and escaped from his hand. It drew a beautiful arc in the air and was about to fall back into the water. Meng Chao Ran's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He jumped out and caught the fish before it fell back into the water. Then he flipped back and grabbed a basin of water. Without stopping, he went back to the pond, scooped up half of the water, and put the fish in. Then he wiped the water off his face and handed the basin to Tan Tan with a smile. Put it in your room and look after it. This fish is very precious. Don't let it die. Tan Tan was confused. Master, what kind of fish is this? It's so small, it's not even enough to make soup. Make soup? You only know how to eat. Meng Chao Ran was both angry and amused. He patted his head and reprimanded, This is a priceless treasure. Wouldn't it be a pity to eat it? Priceless treasure? Tan Tan scratched his head and looked at the fish curiously. No matter how he looked at it, it was just a fish. Even though it looked a little strange, it wasn't a dragon. This is the divine chi-gathering fish. Chu Yang also squatted down and looked at the fish. I didn't expect that Tan Tan would find such a treasure. You're really lucky. Divine chi-gathering fish? That's right. According to ancient legends, the divine chi-gathering fish is a treasure of the 3 Stars divine clan. This kind of fish couldn't grow big, their meat wasn't delicious, and they didn't have any powerful skills. However, if he placed the fish in a fish tank and raised it in his room, it would be able to absorb the surrounding spiritual energy to the greatest extent and gather it there. For a martial artist's cultivation, it could achieve twice the result with half the effort. It can be said to be a treasure that martial artists yearn for even in their dreams. Chu Yang said softly. That's right. The other greatest benefit is that with this fish around, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth absorbed from the surroundings is pure spiritual chi of heaven and earth. This was the hardest part. The existence of this kind of fish had already become a legend. For many years, it had only existed in ancient records, and no one had ever seen it before. Tan Tan, how did you find out? Meng Chao Ran was pleasantly surprised as he looked at Tan Tan. It was just now. Just now, I was fetching water from the pond, and suddenly, the sky turned dark. I couldn't even see my fingers in front of me. I was very scared, so I stayed by the pond and didn't dare to move. After half an hour, the sky started to brighten. Then, I noticed that the soil under the pond was constantly moving, as if something was trying to come out. Then I kept watching. Tan Tan spread out his hands. Then this guy came out of the soil. I saw that it looked strange, so I caught it. The sky turned dark. Meng Chao Ran frowned. When the sky changed, he and Wu Yunliang were in the stone room, so they didn't know. Now that he heard Tan Tan's words, he immediately felt that something was wrong. The sky turned dark for half an hour? Then this fish came out of the soil? Meng Chao Ran looked up at the sky, and his eyes flashed with a trace of worry. The things of the divine clan have not appeared in this world for a long time. Why did this divine chi-gathering fish suddenly appear? It was morning, so why did the sky suddenly turn dark? Could it be that the sky is going to change? Meng Chao Ran thought hard. After a long time, he finally gave up. However, from his expression, it seemed that he had added another worry to his mind. Chu Yang also blinked his eyes in confusion. He also didn't know that after he obtained the sword point of the Calamity Sword and fused with it, such an earth-shattering feat would happen. Tan Tan, since you found this fish, then let's do it. Then, you can make a fish tank and raise it in your room. Meng Chao Ran's expression returned to normal. Yes, master. Chu Yang and I have always been in the same room. This way we can both use it. Tan Tan laughed happily. From today onwards, Chu Yang and you will sleep separately. Meng Chao Ran's face sank. But Tan Tan cried out in disappointment. No reason. Chu Yang has other important things to do. Then let's put this fish in Chu Yang's room. Tan Tan said with a sad face, although I also need it, Chu Yang is about to go out on a dangerous mission. He needs it even more than I do. Even if it can only improve a little, it is still good. Well, it would be best if Chu Yang takes it with him when he goes out. Then, he can absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth anytime and anywhere. Chu Yang's heart was shocked. He turned around and looked at Tan Tan. He only felt a surge of warmth in his heart. He didn't speak for a long time. Meng Ran had already explained the benefits of the divine qi-gathering fish. Although Tan Tan was a little unreliable, he was not stupid. He couldn't not understand. However, he didn't even think of monopolizing such a priceless treasure. He even wanted to give it to him without batting an eyelid. Although he didn't want to give it to him, he still wanted to give it to him. But Meng Ran's eyes were full of gratification. I am here with Master. There is no danger. Tan Tan said seriously, Chu Yang needs it more than I do. Silly boy. Meng Ran stretched out his hand and stroked Tan Tan's head. If you want to protect Chu Yang, you must improve your strength first. When your brother needs your help, you will be able to use your greatest strength. If Chu Yang goes out with this thing, it will lead to a fatal disaster. Do you understand? Tan Tan suddenly opened his mouth and hurriedly said, Then I will keep it. Then he looked at Chu Yang with some embarrassment. Chu Yang, I'm not stingy. This, I understand. Chu Yang hugged his shoulder and said deeply, Good brother. Tan Tan, how did you know I was going out? Chu Yang asked. You have been preparing these past few days, but you didn't tell me. I am not stupid, we have been together for more than 10 years. If you don't tell me, it will be dangerous. Tan Tan snorted and said, Moreover, Master has been with you a lot these past few days. If I didn't know, then I would have been stupid. Chu Yang laughed. Tan Tan snorted and suddenly said seriously, Chu Yang, I don't know where you are going. But I will practice seriously and help you in the future. Good. I will wait for you. When the time comes, let us brothers work together to reverse the world. Chu Yang was full of heroic spirit and shouted. He only felt a sense of confidence in his heart. With such a good brother, how can I not work hard? One must know that this reversal will change Tan Tan's fate. Chapter 45. For the next 3 days, Meng Ran gave Chu Yang a comprehensive training. In these 3 days, the master and disciple stayed in the same room. Meng Ran practiced all the skills he knew. He patiently instilled his own Jianghu experience and the things he needed to pay attention to. Although Chu Yang was clear about these, he enjoyed the feeling of being cared for by his master. Therefore, when Meng Ran spoke, he listened very seriously. She tried her best to enjoy the warmth of that moment. This warmth, he missed it in his previous life. But in this life, Chu Yang did not want to miss it. He knew that if he did not listen, Meng Ran would not say anything, but his heart would feel very uncomfortable. Chu Yang did not want his master to feel uncomfortable. 3 days passed in a blink of an eye. On this day, Chu Yang stepped out of his room and looked at the early morning mist. He took a deep breath. His eyes were somewhat reluctant. Today, he would leave here. This time, he did not know when he would come back, or if he could come back. There was a heavy rain last night. The entire purple bamboo garden was washed clean. Meng Ran said early in the morning that he would go up the mountain to pick herbs. Chu Yang knew that his master could not bear to leave. So he simply hid. A scream came from the toilet. Then, Tan Tan dashed out, and brought along a burst of strong stench. His whole body was filthy. Chu Yang could not help but be stunned. Why was this guy still holding the divine qi-gathering fish in his hand? Tan Tan's face was full of awkwardness and depression as he brushed past him. Then he rushed into the room and threw the divine qi-gathering fish into the fish tank with a dong sound. Then he took off his clothes and ran out naked. He carried a wooden bucket to the side of the pond and poured water on his head. After several buckets, the stench faded a little. Chu Yang was originally feeling sentimental, but he was confused by Tan Tan. This little guy was like a psychopath. What was he doing? Did he fall into a cesspool early in the morning? Tan Tan finally cleaned himself up. He jumped into the room, and put on a set of clothes at lightning speed. Then he rolled the dirty clothes into a ball and threw them out. Then he came out with a wry smile. His face scrunched up like a bitter gourd. Before he could say anything, he let out a deep sigh. "What's wrong?" Chu Yang narrowed his eyes. "Ah, don't mention it." Tan Tan wanted to cry but had no tears. It turned out that ever since this guy obtained the divine chi-gathering fish, he treated it like a treasure and kept it in his fish tank. From time to time, he would feed them some food and water plants. But a day later, he turned over in the fish tank. No matter how Tan Tan teased her, she didn't respond. It floated in the fish tank with its belly turned over, without any signs of life. When Tan Tan picked him up today, he discovered that his body had become stiff. He sighed sadly and held the fish in his hand. Coincidentally, he was going to the toilet, so he took it with him. He thought that since it was dead, he might as well throw it into the toilet. But after he threw the fish into the cesspool, the most unexpected thing happened. The fish actually scuttled around in the dirty water of the latrine. It was extremely lively. Tan Tan was completely helpless. So, he had no choice but to jump down and grab it again. The most tragic thing was, there was a heavy rain last night. Tan Tan almost swam in the latrine. Cough cough. Ha ha ha. After listening to this matter, Chu Yang held his stomach and was out of breath. His whole body was twitching with laughter. Even in his dreams, he would never have thought that this guy would make such a blunder. Tan Tan sighed. His face was full of tragedy. He cursed bitterly. How would I know what happened to this dead fish? It stayed in the fish tank, motionless, like a corpse. After I threw it into the latrine, it actually became lively. Does this dead fish only move in smelly places? Chu Yang rubbed his stomach. Snot and tears flowed down his face. You idiot. The divine chi-gathering fish absorbs the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It also needs to digest it. If it absorbs enough, it will stop moving. It will quietly digest the spiritual energy and then move on to the next step. Therefore, during the time when it is digesting the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, it is the best time for a martial artist to use it to cultivate. And you actually threw it into the latrine. Tan Tan's mouth opened into the shape of a goose egg. Why didn't you say so earlier? You idiot. Chu Yang said resentfully. This divine chi-gathering fish can survive even if it is buried deep underground. How can you die if you are kept in a fish tank? Use that stupid head of yours and think carefully. Besides, it relies on the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to live. It is useless no matter what you feed it. Throwing it into the latrine, you really did it. If other people knew that you had a divine chi-gathering fish and threw it into the latrine, I guess all the martial artists in the world would come to kill you. Tan Tan sighed and said, It's not easy for me either. My clothes are ruined. Look at my hands. He extended his hands as he spoke, and put them under his nose to smell them. Then he exposed an expression as if he wanted to vomit. I will use these hands to eat later. How can I eat like this? You deserve it. Chu Yang thought for a moment. He could not help but laugh. He went into the fish tank and saw the pitiful divine chi-gathering fish jumping back and forth. It was vomiting and having diarrhea. It seemed that this fish was disgusted. Hurry up and change the water. Chu Yang yelled. Tan Tan quickly did as he was told. After changing the water 7 or 8 times, the divine chi-gathering fish finally calmed down. It lay at the bottom of the water with its belly bulging. It seemed that it had some hidden bitterness. It seemed that this time, it had to take a good rest. Chu Yang did not expect that when he left, he would laugh to the point of tears. It was not until he had walked far away that he heard Tan Tan's hoarse voice shouting, Chu Yang, take care of yourself. I will come and find you. I will help you. His voice was choked with sobs as he shouted. Chu Yang's footsteps paused, but he did not look back. He just waved his hand, turned around, and disappeared from Tan Tan's sight. You must not die. Tan Tan screamed. Tears streamed down his face. He suddenly squatted on the ground and sobbed. He did not know what Chu Yang was going to do, but he knew that Chu Yang's mission this time was extremely dangerous. Otherwise, his master would not have reacted like that. Tan Tan was very worried and sad. Chu Yang's heart was a little sour, but he held on and did not look back. Step by step he left. In the distance, on top of a mountain, Meng Chao ran bathed in the rising sun. His eyes were fixed on his brother as he left step by step. His hands were tightly clenched into fists. In his right hand, there was a piece of paper. On the paper, Chu Yang had written a few words: fleeting snow cloud steps. You need to lie down, reverse the flow of your internal energy, and push forward from the last step. Chu Yang floated on the mountain path. On his back there was a small bag. He walked out of Beyond the Heavens sect alone, embarking on a lonely journey, facing a fate that had become uncertain. Chu Yang's heart suddenly felt a faint sense of melancholy. He suddenly remembered a few words. This time, I will not look back even if I have to go through a mountain of blades and a sea of flames. This time, I will walk the path of Jianghu in death. This time, I will laugh proudly at the world. From now on, I will go straight to the heavens without looking back. These words were from a very popular song in his previous life, Jianghu Journey. Mo Qingwu once played and sang the song. Chu Yang had a deep impression of it. Thinking about it, Chu Yang could not help but smile. He murmured, "This journey, there will be a reversal of the heavens. This journey, there will be a reincarnation of destiny. This journey, I will accompany you to laugh at the world of mortals. This journey, there will be a reversal of the heavens." He softly hummed a few lines of lyrics that he added. He walked out of Beyond the Heavens sect, out of the range of the first garden peak. He did not even look back. The young man's hair casually fell down, covering half of his face. From the fluttering hair, a pair of eyes calmly watched the world. His gaze was like a knife, as if it wanted to split the world. The rising sun shone on his body, dragging his shadow. The dense fog in the mountain forest added a layer of bright red color to his back. Chapter 46. On the main road, a carriage was slowly moving. In front and behind the carriage, 8 riders with cold faces urged their horses forward. An old coachman with gray hair squinted his eyes and held a whip in his hand. His expression was somewhat indifferent as he looked forward. With the crisp sound of the whip, he left a long stretch of road behind. Dust flew everywhere. Inside the carriage, there was an old man with a thin face. He was frowning slightly as if he was thinking about something. This old man was the world's #1 godly doctor, Du Shiqing. This time, he was going from Great Zhao to Iron Cloud Nation. Senior Du, you only have one mission on this trip to Iron Cloud. That is to use your heaven-reversing divine hand to help the Iron Cloud Nation's dying emperor hold on for a while longer. Do not let him die too early. This was what the Prime Minister of the Empire, Diwu Qingro, had personally received him and solemnly said. Du Shiqing also understood why he wanted the Iron Cloud Nation's emperor to live a little longer. Although Iron Cloud Nation was currently under the Prime Minister's control, the Prime Minister was not the emperor. There were some things that were not legitimate. As long as the Iron Cloud Nation's emperor could hold on for a single breath, then Iron Cloud Nation would never be a monolithic entity. Even if Tai Bu Tian was a genius, as long as he did not dare to kill his own father, then there was nothing he could do. Tai Shicheng's 1 more month of life was 1 more month of time for Great Zhao. It was best to delay until everything was ready and the war broke out. At that time, the biggest flaw of Iron Cloud Nation's Prime Minister is not the Emperor would be exposed. However, this mission was extremely difficult. Only Du Shiqing knew how difficult it was. Du Shiqing smiled bitterly and sighed. Years ago, when Tai Shicheng was in his prime, he was fighting with Great Zhao on the battlefield. At that time, Diwu Qingro was only a grand secretary with the responsibility of supervising the army. He secretly hired the best archer in the world to assassinate Tai Shicheng. In the midst of the chaos, he shot an arrow at Tai Shicheng. The arrow was poisoned. At that time, Tai Shicheng was blocked by a guard. The arrow first went through the guard's chest and then pierced Tai Shicheng's body. The killing power was not strong. But that poison almost took Tai Shicheng's life. It was also Diwu Ro who privately hired him with a large sum of money. He wanted him to work for the country, but in the end he treated Tai Shicheng's injuries. In his entire life, he had only done one thing that violated medical ethics. He had cured Tai Shicheng's poison, but had also planted another incurable chronic poison in his body. The poison slowly eroded Tai Shicheng's body, just like how Great Zhao had slowly eroded Iron Cloud Nation, injuring him, but not letting him die. These past few years, Diwu Ro had taken advantage of the war with Iron Cloud Nation and continued to make contributions. He continued to increase his qualifications and capital. Whether it was the military or the government, Diwu Ro's contributions were second to none. To this day, he was the #1 person in the empire, second only to the emperor. He had been doing meritorious deeds and fighting battles, but he had always allowed Iron Cloud Nation to retain the power to resist and not be destroyed. He treated Iron Cloud Nation as his own meritorious service base. Only now did he truly begin to clean up Iron Cloud Nation because he was already at the peak. With Diwu Ro's current power, even the emperor would not be able to do anything to him. Diwu Ro's use of trickery had reached the acme of perfection. At this point, Tai Shicheng's body was beyond saving. He only had one breath left. If it were not for the amazing Butian Tai, perhaps Iron Cloud Nation would have already become Great Zhao's territory. And now, he still had to clean up after what he had done? Du Shiqing sighed deeply. The road ahead was long. Chu Yang stood on top of a mountain. Using the cover of the dense forest, he quietly watched the slowly approaching group of horses. His palms slightly tightened, and a piece of paper with the words, Iron Cloud Nation has hired the #1 genius doctor in the world, Du Shiqing, to go to Iron Cloud Citadel. Early in the morning he will pass by Evil Tiger Ridge. Then, without pausing, his body shot through the forest like a meteor and rushed down the mountain. This was the path he had planned for a long time ago. Du Shiqing was the key to it. To enter Iron Cloud Nation and reverse fate, it was not as simple as entering a country. After entering, he needed to be valued. Besides being valued, he also needed to gain trust. Only after gaining trust could he gain power. All of this had to be done in a short period of time. At the latest, he needed 2 years to complete the journey that an ordinary person would take in a lifetime. Chu Yang's task was not easy. But he did not look back. Du Shiqing was the beginning of Chu Yang's plan. Neigh. The strong horse let out a long neigh and stopped its steps. In front of the carriage, a young man had already landed. He was dressed in black and had a handsome face. His expression was calm with a hint of excitement as he eagerly looked at the carriage. Who is it? The 8 riders reined in their horses at the same time. 3 swords and 5 sabers left their sheaths at the same time. Is the person in the carriage the #1 genius doctor in the world, the one known as the compassionate saint, Du Shiqing? The young man in black's eyes were filled with excitement. He was full of gratitude and respect. Looking inside the carriage, he did not seem to notice the shining sabers and swords around him. Or you? The leading rider's eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. He coldly looked at the young man and did not let down his guard. At the same time that the remaining few used their auras to lock onto the young man, they spread out without leaving a trace and guarded the carriage tightly from all directions. Am I? The young man took another step forward. He appeared to be very anxious. Whether I am or not, it has nothing to do with you. The leading rider coldly said, Back off. He could see that the young man did not have any evil intentions, but this was a very important matter. He had to be careful. If you are Senior Du, please come out and meet me. The young man said unyieldingly. Presumptuous. With a loud shout, 3 sabers flew out at the same time and chopped toward the young man. The young man in black seemed to be startled. Suddenly, his face showed a hint of anger. He twisted his body and dodged left and right between the sabers. The sabers were like a waterfall, but he was able to move freely between the sabers. He suddenly attacked. His hands were like the claws of an eagle. With a clang, a saber fell to the ground. The leading rider also felt his wrist go numb. His saber almost flew out of his hand. He could not help but be startled. He quickly dismounted and shouted, "Form a formation to meet the enemy." The 7 riders dismounted at the same time. They were ready to fight. The sabers were faintly discernible. "Wait!" Du Shiqing shouted from inside the carriage. Then he calmly said, "Young master, this old man is Du Shiqing. May I know what is the matter?" After he finished speaking, he lifted the curtain and revealed his face. "Senior Du, be careful. This person's origin is unknown. He has ulterior motives." 2 guards immediately stood guard in front of the carriage with their swords. "It really is divine, Dr. Du." The young man in black was so excited that his face turned red. He suddenly ignored the sabers and swords in front of him and stared at Du Shiqing. Step by step, he walked forward without any defense. After 2 steps, his body touched the saber. The leading rider did not intend to withdraw his saber. He just stood there. The young man felt the stinging sensation of the saber piercing his skin. He looked down and smiled embarrassedly. Suddenly, he bowed deeply toward Du Shiqing. This strange action caused everyone to be inexplicably flabbergasted. "Senior Du, do you remember 8 years ago when you practiced medicine to help the world? At that time, under the evil Tiger Ridge, the 2 countries were at war. Senior Du's kind hands saved the dying and helped the wounded? That time, when you came out to pick herbs, you passed by a mountain village and saved a mountain couple?" Chapter 47. And Ironcloud Nation's Emperor Tai Shicheng's injury was treated by him during that time. "Senior Du not only saved my parents, but when he saw that my family was poor, he did not ask for anything. Before he left behind an ingot of silver. Senior Du's great kindness is something my family will never forget." The young man in black saw that Du Shiqing seemed to be thinking and could not help but smile even more. His tone became even more emotional. "At that time, my parents were seriously ill and the family had no means of support. We only survived because of the ingot of silver Senior Du left behind. Senior Du's kindness to my family is as high as the sky and as deep as the earth." "So that's how it is." Du Shiqing seemed to vaguely remember such a thing, but he had no recollection of it. It was as if he only remembered it because the other person mentioned it. However, he had done so many things like this in his life. Even if he did remember, it would have already been blurred by now. However, it had to be said that the feeling of being able to repay a debt of gratitude and being recognized by everyone in the world made everyone feel very happy. "Yes, regarding this matter, my late father Chudi told me more than once that when I grew up, I must find Senior Du and repay this kindness. Before my late father died, he was still brooding over not being able to repay Senior Du," the young man in black said with tears in his eyes. "The heavens have taken pity on me. Today, I finally found out about Senior Du's whereabouts and was able to talk to him face to face to express my gratitude. If my late father knew about this, he would definitely be very happy." As he spoke, his eyes became red. "This Du appreciates your kind intentions, father." Du Shiqing could not help but have a feeling of passing clouds. He sighed and said, "The past is gone." What is it? Your father has already passed away?" "Yes, my late father went into the mountains to hunt a tiger 3 years ago. Unfortunately," the young man in black said with a choked voice. "Unfortunately, your father was a good man." "A good man?" Du Shiqing actually did not remember this until now. However, from the other person's description, this father was poor and was saved by him. For many years, he did not forget this kindness and never forgot to repay it. Even in his death, he did not forget to repay this kindness. Moreover, going into the mountains to hunt a tiger and fighting a tiger was truly a good man. Such a good man was, of course, a good man. Unconsciously, Du Shiqing also felt that he had done a good deed. Although Dong Xuebing's memory is blurry, he is still a teenager, and he can't fake his feelings for her. Senior Du finally remembered. The black-clothed youth shouted happily, "My name is Chu Yang. I have seen Senior Du before." "Time, you're all grown up now." Du Shiqing stroked his beard and smiled. He felt very comforted. At this moment, there was a feeling of having a descendant of an old friend. He could not help but sigh. If your father could see your skills today, he would be smiling like a spring. Before the new year, this humble one followed my master and practiced martial arts. Chu Yang looked a little embarrassed as he said, "Cough, cough. I've finally met Mr. Du today. I also know that Senior Du is going to Iron Cloud this time. Although I am not strong enough, I am willing to escort Senior Du all the way and do my best." "There is no need for that, right?" Du Shiqing said with some hesitation. "Could it be that Senior Du does not even want to give me a chance to repay you?" Chu Yang said sadly, "I know my martial arts are low, but this is my sincerity. I want to fulfill my father's dying wish. I ask Senior Du to fulfill my wish." At this point, there were no more questions. Even the 8 horsemen's attitude toward Chu Yang changed greatly. One of them even patted Chu Yang's shoulder and said with a smile, "Good, you say your martial arts are low? The 3 of us were not able to stop you." Chu Yang said humbly, "That was because big brothers let me go. Seeing my age, you did not want to use too much force. Otherwise, wouldn't you have cut me in half?" The horsemen all laughed. Although everyone knew that Chu Yang did not hold back, it was also true that he did not use his full strength. They liked this guy's tactfulness. Receiving someone's favor, not forgetting it, persevering to fulfill his father's dying wish, this was a great display of loyalty and filial piety. Such a person, no matter where he went, would be welcomed. "Very well, since we are old friends, you should follow me. When we reach Iron Cloud, we will see if there is an opportunity to find a promotion for you," Du Shiqing said with a smile. The 8 horsemen all looked at Du Shiqing with admiration. Du Shiqing's recommendation, especially at a time when Iron Cloud Nation needed his help, how rare was this? It could be said that as long as Du Shiqing opened his mouth, this young man's future would be bright. "I do not dare. I am not interested in those things," Chu Yang said casually with a disheartened expression. "I only need to confirm that Senior Du is safely in Iron Cloud. Then I can leave with peace of mind. Although I am not a good person, it is better to stay away from those things. I don't want to lose my head for no reason at any time." How could Chu Yang not know that this was Du Shiqing's last test? Du Shiqing put on an expression as if he did not care about fame and reputation. He also put on an expression as if he was trying his best to hide his despair. Hearing this, even the old coachman's expression relaxed. Du Shiqing shook his head and laughed. "Very well, since that is the case, you can follow me." Chu Yang's sadness immediately turned into joy. He jumped up and said, "Thank you, Senior Du." Du Shiqing saw that this young man was so happy and could not help but laugh heartily. Little did he know that this young man, who was honest, kind, filial, and righteous in his eyes, was so happy that he almost vomited. Du Shiqing also did not know that the so-called sincere memories and last words were all fake. Chu Yang did not even know his own identity, so how could he have it, Chu Daji? Chapter 48. Everyone, including Du Shiqing, let out a long sigh as if they understood everything. Then, they looked at Chu Yang with sympathetic eyes. This kind of snatching away someone's love was too common. Especially between martial brothers, there were some things that could not be said. Chu Yang cooperated and put on a painful expression. His 2 hands hugged his head and curled up. His 10 fingers tightly grabbed his hair and even pulled out a lot of hair. It was enough to show how much pain he was in. "Sigh." Du Shiqing sighed and said heavily, "This matter, no one should mention it again." The 8 riders agreed together. Even the old coachman's eyes softened as he looked at Chu Yang. It was no wonder that when she asked him that day, this little guy showed a desperate and helpless look. So that was the reason. "Thank you." Chu Yang lowered his head and gratefully said in a hoarse voice. Then, he said in a painful tone, "Once I complete my father's last wish and repay Mr. Du's great kindness, I will disappear from this world. From now on, I will be alone in the mountains." A man does not have to worry about not having a wife. Du Shiqing patted his shoulder and comforted him, "You don't have to care so much." Chu Yang nodded heavily and sighed, but did not say anything. It was clear that his mood was difficult to get rid of. After this matter, the attitude of the people in the group toward Chu Yang changed greatly. There was a faint sense of closeness. He was loyal, filial, infatuated, and endured humiliation. Such a rare young man, Chu Yang's performance had completely conquered these people. Even Chu Yang himself did not know that he had gained so many advantages in just a moment. The leader even sighed and patted Chu Yang's shoulder. "Little brother, you don't have to be like this. Look on the bright side. As long as you have money, there are many beautiful girls in the kiln." Chu Yang nodded sorrowfully. He raised his head and forced a smile that was uglier than crying. Even though no one said anything, the way they looked at Chu Yang softened a lot. The weak, no matter what time it was, would always arouse people's sympathy. 34 Even the old coachman who had always been by the side of the horse sighed deeply. He lifted the sole of his shoe and tapped the ash from his cigarette. That pair of eyes that had seen through the world also seemed a little misty. Chu Yang sighed, but in his heart, he knew that Du Shiqing's test was over. The only thing left was to go to Iron Cloud Nation. Iron Cloud Nation's old foxes were not as easy to fool as Du Shiqing. Du Shiqing was a divine physician of his generation. Legend has it that no matter what kind of illness it was, when it came to him, it would be cured. However, he was just a doctor, and his medical skills were superb. Everyone was polite to him, so he might not have much experience in dealing with people. Chu Yang also knew that a few years later, Du Shiqing's reputation would be ruined because of this incident in Iron Cloud Nation. Later on, for some unknown reason, the Iron Cloud monarch's illness was exposed. It turned out that Du Shiqing had done this many years ago. This matter caused a huge uproar in the entire lower three heavens. Du Shiqing also exploded because of this matter. Faced with the accusations of all the heroes of the world, he admitted to this matter and silently committed suicide. Just like that, a divine physician of a generation was reduced to dust. Perhaps he was just a doctor, or perhaps he had no other choice, but what was done was done. Chu Yang did not feel any special pity for him. Along the way, he had deceived and used Du Shiqing, so he did not feel any guilt. However, in these past few days, he could see that this kind divine physician was not a bad person. Perhaps it was just a confrontation between two countries, each with their own master. After all, he was a citizen of Great Zhao. In the end, perhaps he was just a sacrifice, a tool used by Diwu Qinro to appease the people after he conquered Iron Cloud Nation. As for these 8 riders, after careful observation, Chu Yang was finally certain. Among these 8 people, there was no one from Golden Horse Riders department. From the looks of it, the 8 of them were pure warriors and did not seem to be scheming at all. Furthermore, their cultivation wasn't very high. They should be around grade 5 martial warriors. These kinds of people would be more than enough to deal with a small thief, but if they wanted to deal with a master, they would not be able to do so. It seemed that Du Shiqing was just pretending. The only real expert was the old man driving the carriage. Perhaps Du Shiqing himself was a master, but whether it was in the previous life or the present, Chu Yang had never heard of this kind divine physician's martial arts. "Chu Yang, how old are you?" While Chu Yang was silent, the mysterious old coachman came over with his smoking pipe and asked such a question. 10. Chu Yang was afraid that someone would come to talk to him, because his grief was just a pretense. If he talked too much, what would he do if he was exposed? 10. It seems that you know about the matters between men and women quite early. The old coachman revealed a wretched smile, revealing 2 rows of yellow teeth. However, a light flashed in his eyes, making Chu Yang realize that this old coachman was not here to make small talk. This kind of thing is hard to explain. In fact, even now, I am still confused. Chu Yang sighed and said with disappointment, "In this world there are many things that are always peaceful, but once lost, they become unforgettable." You are right. After the old coachman heard these words, he was silent for a long time. Then he smiled faintly and said, "Always peaceful, it becomes unforgettable. It's late, let's go to sleep." After saying this, he sat next to the fire and stared blankly at the flickering flames, not saying a word. The flickering flames reflected in his dim yellow eyes, and for a moment he seemed to be in a daze. This actually made Chu Yang a bit surprised. This was the last time this old coachman came to test him. Chu Yang was very clear about this, but why did he give up after he said such a sentence? After thinking about it carefully, Chu Yang sighed. It's in a peaceful and quiet place that things become unforgettable. It turned out that this saying wasn't something that was said casually. Just like in his previous life, he and Imo Qingwu had gone through many earth-shattering events together. But after Imo Qingwu passed away, he couldn't help but recall those memories. What lingered in his heart for a long time was still that simple warmth, that calm gentleness. Not those so-called major events. Who hasn't been young before? Who hasn't been young before? Chu Yang was thinking about this when he suddenly heard the old coachman murmur a sentence that was actually the same as what he was thinking. He could not help but look at each other in surprise. The old coachman turned his head and looked at him with a smile in his eyes. Old coachman Gao, don't talk about youth, it's already winter here. The leader of the knights held a wine bag and laughed loudly, raising it up and gulping it down. The other 7 knights also burst into laughter. Old coachman Gao snorted and suddenly flicked his pipe. A spark flew out and landed directly in the wine bag that the big man had just moved away from his mouth. The wine bag still had more than half of the wine. When such a weak spark flew in, the flame actually jumped up a few feet high with a bang. The leader of the knights was careless and half of his hair was burned. For a moment, the smell of burnt pig feet filled the air. He could not help but yell and angrily said, "Old coachman Gao, are you serious?" Old coachman Gao snorted and slowly walked away with his pipe in his hand. The leader of the knights spat and angrily watched him walk away, but he did not dare to speak again. Chu Yang's eyes suddenly shrank. Looking at the receding figure of old coachman Gao, his eyes revealed a trace of fear. Old coachman Gao's move looked simple, but Chu Yang knew that it was not easy. Half of the wine bag was at least 3 or 4 pounds of wine. Even if a torch was thrown in, it would be immediately extinguished. Let alone a small spark like this? This required good eyesight, timing, and a strong martial power. These were not the things that Chu Yang was most afraid of. Chapter 49. This tall old man was clearly a human. How could he know how to control fire like the divine clan? Could it be that Du Shiqing's bodyguard's background is not simple? Also, wasn't this journey a bit too peaceful? While Chu Yang was thinking, the calamity sword in his dantian suddenly jumped. A sense of extreme danger rose from his heart. All the hairs on his body stood on end. His eyes turned cold, and he didn't even turn around to check. His body spun, rolled, and bounced up. He made a turn in the air, and immediately moved from the side of the fire to behind a tree. The movement of his body at this moment was almost unbelievable. Immediately after, there was a sharp whistling sound. A large stone slab, several feet wide, fell from the sky. It smashed towards Du Shiqing's position. His grasp of the position was extremely precise. Du Shiqing was within the stone's attack range. Right in the middle. Old man Gao shouted angrily. His old body suddenly became as agile as a leopard. He leaped forward, but it was too late. At this moment, Chu Yang suddenly appeared next to the stone slab. A sword appeared out of nowhere in his hand and stabbed forward like a poisonous snake. The tip of the sword pierced the edge of the stone slab like a poisonous dragon. Ding. This large stone slab was originally fiercely spinning as it smashed down, but when this sword appeared, it just happened to stab into the gap between the spinning, causing the speed of this large stone slab to slow down by a tiny bit. It was like a huge mountain falling right onto the tip of a lever. The subtlety of this moment was indescribable. Immediately after, the stone slab's counterforce exploded like thunder. Chu Yang, who was holding the sword, felt as if his chest was hit by the stone slab. He spat out a mouthful of blood and flipped back in the air. But in the end, he managed to buy some time. Even if it was an insignificant amount of time, a normal person would not even be able to blink. But with this slight delay, old man Gao's body was already in between the stone slab and the ground. He angrily shouted and punched the air. A white light flashed on his fist, and the several thousand gene stone slab was suddenly smashed into pieces like a rain of stones. Du Shiqing was safe and sound. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, pitch-black arrows rained down from the top of the mountain, shrouding the area in all directions. Formation! Meet the enemy! The leader of the knights shouted, and the 8 of them rolled on the ground in an orderly manner. They nimbly moved to the side of their warhorses, and in the next moment, a round shield appeared in their hands. Although they dodged quickly, there was still a knight who was hit in the shoulder and calf at the same time. The iron arrow pierced through the air with pieces of flesh and blood. Before he could finish his scream, 3 of his companions' shields had already covered his entire body. Thud, thud, thud. The iron arrows formed an iron curtain in an instant. The sound of the arrows piercing the ground was like rain hitting a sandpit. The ground of several hundred feet had turned into a huge hedgehog. Old Man Gao screamed, and his body turned into a gray whirlwind. 20 or 30 arrows were caught in his hand before they hit the ground. With a shake of his hand, they turned into dozens of black lightning bolts and were reflected back. He did not look at the result. Without stopping, he picked up Du Shiqing. His body flashed like a gray fog, and he was already next to the carriage. In the next moment, Du Shiqing was stuffed back into the carriage. With a series of popping sounds, the incoming arrows suddenly changed direction and rained down on the carriage. The huge force shook the whole carriage, but not a single arrow could penetrate it. This carriage was actually specially made. In the darkness of the forest, there was the sound of arrows being deflected by the tall old man hitting a tree. There was also a short scream. Old Man Gao's body flashed in the next moment. His face was covered with a layer of green. His first reaction was not to kill the enemy, but to look at Chu Yang's direction. Only he knew how difficult Chu Yang's sword was. If it was not for that sword, everything would have been unimaginable. Whether it was the timing, the position, the control of the power, or the choice of direction to dodge, they were all extremely difficult to come by. That sword was simply a stroke of genius. This young man was only a martial warrior. Even if he was a peak martial master, his sword would be useless against such a huge rock falling from the top of the mountain. However, Chu Yang was able to use that sword to block it. Even though it was only a small gap, it was enough to buy some time. After that sword strike, an ordinary green steel sword was not damaged at all. The price was only a mouthful of blood. This was simply unimaginable. The opponent's choice of timing was also very strange. They were already in Iron Cloud Nation's territory. Nothing happened along the way, but they were ambushed here. Moreover, the opponent did not ambush them in the middle of the night, but at dusk. Everything happened so suddenly that it felt as if a group of bandits had suddenly found a fat sheep and decided to make a last-minute robbery. Even Old Man Gao, who had been in Jianghu for his entire life, was not prepared. But Chu Yang was able to use that sword strike in such a hurry. It was a sword strike filled with a mystical aura. It was as if everything had been rehearsed thousands of times in advance. Old Man Gao knew that no one would rehearse like this. This was not a coincidence, and it was not premeditated. When he looked at where Chu Yang was standing, he found that Chu Yang, who was originally rolling there, was nowhere to be seen. The 8 knights formed a shield formation and moved slowly. Gradually, they arrived near the carriage and protected the entire carriage. Old Man Gao wanted to chase after them, but after thinking about it, he did not move. He only ordered the carriage to slowly move away. The horses that pulled the carriage had already turned into 2 huge iron porcupines. Half of the horses of the 8 riders were also shot dead. Old Man Gao's body swayed. Bang, bang, bang. One by one, the horse corpses were thrown into the air. In a very short time, the corpses of the horses were lined up in a row, blocking the view from the forest. Then he covered his chest with both hands and was on full alert. He looked around vigilantly and retreated step by step. Their mission was only to protect Du Shiqing, not to kill the enemy. While he was doing this, the enemy did not react at all. Up until now, the attacker did not even say a word. Except for the 2 screams at the beginning, everything was like a pantomime. The rain of arrows stopped abruptly. Everything returned to silence, as if nothing had happened. From the extreme intensity to the extreme silence, there was no buffer at all. As the rain of arrows disappeared, the boundless twilight reigned over the earth. The world was suddenly filled with an oppressive atmosphere that made it hard for people to breathe. The enemy's attack was not limited to this. This was something that everyone was clear about. But who was the enemy? Which side did they belong to? Was it Great Zhao? Iron Cloud? Or Limitless? Or were there others? All of this was hidden in the fog. But no matter which side it was, it must have been premeditated for a long time. It was not until they retreated 10 feet that there was a reaction from the forest. After a series of strange noises, a sharp sound pierced through the air. A black shadow shot out from the forest like an angry dragon. With an unstoppable momentum, it arrived in front of the carriage in the blink of an eye. The void behind the black shadow was already trembling from this tyrannical power. One arrow. However, the body of the arrow was actually 3 feet long. As if it came from hell, it was full of the smell of death. Under the cover of night, it viciously shot towards the carriage. Chapter 50. Siege Crossbow. Bastard. Manager Gao roared. In the next moment, a faint flame appeared in his hand as he threw a punch. Control fire. With a bang, the tip of the black dragon-like arrow exploded. Sparks flew in all directions. However, the arrow's momentum was still the same. It did not stop and continued to charge forward. After the first punch, Manager Gao roared and threw 18 punches in a row. Each of his fists carried this strange ability to control fire, and each of his fists fiercely struck the tip of the ballista. He was like a hammer, constantly striking the tip of the huge arrow. In other words, the arrow was like a hammer, constantly hitting the tall old man's fist. Qi filled the air and shot in all directions. In the night sky, it was as if hundreds of thousands of fireworks were blooming at the same time. Broken pieces of wood flew in all directions. Manager Gao threw a punch and then shouted, 18 punches. After 18 yells, the 30-foot-long ballista was now only 10 foot long. Manager Gao's back shook and he was forced to take a few steps back. His back hit the carriage with a heavy thud. However, the crossbow in front of him finally lost its momentum and fell to the ground. The air was filled with the acrid smell of burning flames. Manager Gao's chest heaved up and down as he stared at the forest. In the next moment, his head tilted and he spat out a mouthful of blood. As he spat out the blood, a dark red color appeared on his face and disappeared. His breathing also calmed down. He didn't expect that the enemy would install a siege crossbow in this place. Caught off guard, even with his cultivation base as a saber grandmaster, he still suffered internal injuries from the powerful impact of the siege crossbow. Siege crossbows were specially made by the army to break open the gates of a city. Generally, they were more than 10 meters long and were made directly from a black ironwood tree trunk. The tip was covered with a huge, sharp iron sheet. They were usually soaked in a pool of black oil. Only when attacking a city would they be used. Every time a shot was fired, it required at least 100 strong men to pull the bowstring together. Only then could the shot be used to determine the outcome of a battle. The power of the siege crossbow was enormous and indestructible. Once the siege crossbow was used, then an ordinary city would be destroyed without a doubt. After a moment of silence, a clear clapping sound came from the direction of the dense forest. A voice said, "As expected of the fire saber sect, you are indeed impressive. A single ballista could have broken through the city gates, but you blocked it all by yourself. I'm impressed." Following this voice, 8 people quietly appeared from different positions at the same time. Wearing black clothes and a mask, his eyes were cold and sharp. He walked step by step towards the tall old man. The tall old man's pupils shrank. "Who are you people?" One of them snorted coldly and said, "Rumor has it that Fire Saber Great Master Gao Wei Cheng has already left Jianghu. I didn't expect it to be false." The dignified saber master actually became someone's bodyguard and lived a carefree life like a dog. How enviable. "Gao Wei Cheng, where is your saber?" Manager Gao's body shook. He suddenly straightened his back. His originally stooped body suddenly straightened up. His eyes flashed with a sharp light. He coldly said, "Since you know me, Gao Wei Cheng, then you must not be a nobody. Take off your mask." The last sentence, "Take off your mask," was an earth-shattering roar. That person was not moved at all. He stood up straight and said indifferently, "Gao Wei Cheng, if you take Du Shiqing back, we will not pursue you. Otherwise, today will be the day you, the Fire Saber Great Master, die." Manager Gao looked up to the sky and laughed. "Such big words. Today, I want to see how you will make me stay here." Another person in black sneered, "Fire Saber Great Master? Is it that great?" Suddenly he shouted, "Everyone, attack together. One of you will tie down Gao Wei Cheng. The other two, immediately kill Du Shiqing." The 8 people shouted and suddenly unsheathed their sabers and swords and rushed forward at the same time. Manager Gao had already seen that these people's martial arts were not very high, but they were very average. They should all be martial masters. They were still a big step away from him. But this side-by-side charge suddenly brought with it the bitter killing intent of a magnificent army charging at the same time. "You are from Iron Cloud's military?" The opponent's aura was fierce and majestic. Even if a normal martial artist was stronger than them, it would be difficult to bring out this kind of aura. Manager Gao suddenly had an idea and asked loudly. The opponent did not answer. In a flash, they closed in and slashed down with their sabers. Manager Gao shouted, "Protect the carriage." With a flick of his wrist, a dark red saber suddenly appeared. The moment it appeared, saber light filled the sky like a curtain of rain. However, in this curtain of rain, there were flames floating in all directions. Dang, dang, dang. The sound of weapons hitting each other was endless. In a flash, the 7 people were engaged in a fierce battle. The other 2 people did not care about the battle. With long swords in their hands, they rushed toward the carriage like crazy tigers. If there were no obstacles, Manager Gao was confident that he could kill these 8 people one by one. However, if he wanted to kill all of them in one go, it would be impossible. Moreover, under the attack of the siege crossbow, he had already suffered serious internal injuries. He was even more powerless. At this moment, one of the opponents was holding him back. The other 2 people and the 8 guards could not stop them. He could not help but feel anxious. Chu Yang had already sneaked into the mountain forest when the siege crossbows were opened in a domineering manner. He was like a lone wolf that had pounced into the desert and returned to his territory. After thrusting out the sword, he immediately rolled back. Borrowing a mouthful of blood, he spat out the shock of his internal organs caused by the extreme pressure in his body. Then, he kicked off with his 2 feet, stirring up a cloud of dirt on the ground. Using the dirt as cover, his body quickly wriggled on the ground a few times like a large snake, and he had already returned to the back of the big tree from which he had attacked. Then, with a strange movement, he moved from one tree to another. His body stretched out and he was already at the waist of the tree. Using the branches as cover, he continuously dodged more than 10 trees and went deep into the forest. The whole process was as smooth as the wind blowing through the trees. It was natural. As his body moved, even the branches next to him did not sway in the slightest. Even if it was a top assassin, if they saw Chu Yang's movements at this moment, their eyeballs would fall to the ground. This was the path Chu Yang had chosen a long time ago. When he chose this path, it was even long before the attack. His habit was that no matter where he rested, he would first choose a path of retreat and a path of attack. And his position was between these 2 lines. He could attack if he advanced and defend if he retreated. This kind of ambush was bound to be a large number. Just by looking at the rain of arrows, he knew that passively defending was not a solution. Even if the enemy wanted to exhaust them, they could still exhaust them. The only way was to attack and resolve the crisis. Du Shiqing could not die. Du Shiqing had Manager Gao to protect him. At least, he would not be in danger for a while. Chu Yang was not worried. Therefore, after he made that critical strike, he immediately decided on his next course of action. Into the forest. Chapter 51. The first enemy he saw was a man covered in a layer of trees. Only his eyes could be seen. These two eyes were cold and calm, without any expression. Just by looking at his eyes, Chu Yunxing knew that this person was a warrior who had survived hundreds of battles. This kind of person only has one creed in life: kill the enemy and complete the mission. On the ground in front of him, there was a huge crossbow buried in the ground. On top of it, there were 10 shiny black arrows, ready to fire at any moment. Chu Yang held his breath and moved forward slowly. Now, his body had already reached the top of the tree. Like a silent ghost, he moved forward strangely under the cover of the thick branches. Chu Yunxing looked down from above. Who knew how many of these shiny arrowheads there were in the vicinity? There were at least 50 people. This was clearly a premeditated ambush. How did the enemy know that this group of people would be resting here? And they even buried the crossbows in advance? Chu Yunxing looked at the positions of the enemies. Chu Yang frowned. The enemy's positions were too accurate. Every enemy's position was within the line of sight of at least 3 people. This way, they would be able to coordinate with each other. If they were discovered, they would be able to provide support. This was a formation that only the most elite soldiers in the army could set up. If they tried to ambush any one of them, they would be discovered by the other 3. This was because even though the other party's hiding spot was absolutely hidden, to their own people, there was no blind spot in their line of sight. If they wanted to wipe out this group of people silently, there was no other way other than to ambush them. In the middle of the forest, behind a bush, a blurry figure was lying motionless. From the looks of it, he was no different from the others. However, Chu Yang could tell at a glance that this person was a very important person. Because of his position, at least 10 of his companions could see him at the same time. The rest of them could only see at most 5 people. Furthermore, he was in the middle. It was as if he was under the protection of his own people. Beside him, hidden by the branches, there was a huge crossbow. Siege crossbows. At this moment, the tall old man's conversation with the 8 people outside the forest could be heard clearly. If you take Du Shiqing back now, we will not pursue you. Chu Yang's heart suddenly moved when he heard these words. He already had a rough idea of where these people came from. These people had siege crossbows and were very disciplined. They definitely had a military background. Chu Yang's body floated like a ghost as he silently approached this person. Suddenly, his 2 legs kicked off the ground, and he dived down from the top of the tree like lightning. His 10 fingers were like furrows, and he fiercely grabbed at Chu Yang like an eagle hunting for prey. When he was less than 10 feet away from this person, there was a sudden whooshing sound and an arrow flew towards Chu Yang. This arrow seemed to be a signal. At least 30 to 40 arrows flew over like lightning from all directions, making sharp whistling sounds in the air. But apart from the first arrow, the other arrows were obviously a step too late. Chu Yang tilted his body and the tip of the arrow brushed past the tip of his nose. His hands remained motionless as he grabbed the arrow. Just by looking at the enemy's position, Chu Yang immediately changed his mind and took the initiative to attack. As long as this group discovered him, he would use his speed to disrupt their rhythm. Only then would he be able to break their tight coordination. What he needed to do now was not to kill the enemy, but to disrupt the enemy's deployment. Moreover, this person had the highest probability of having an important identity. As long as he could catch him, he would be able to break this ambush. In order to catch this person, he only had one chance to make a move. This person immediately discovered Chu Yang. His eyes flashed. Although he was surprised, he did not lose his composure. With a loud roar, he nimbly jumped up. Before he had even jumped up, the crossbow in his hands had already changed direction. 10 arrows flew towards Chu Yang with a neat whooshing sound. Then, a saber light flashed and ruthlessly chopped towards Chu Yang's neck. Chu Yang's body floated and dodged the arrows. His right hand flashed and passed through the saber light. His hand did not change, but it turned from a claw to a palm and slapped the back of the man's head. His movements were extremely fast. The burly man's eyes widened in anger and disbelief as he fell to the ground like a log. Although this man's reaction was fast, Chu Yang was in a high position. He fell straight down from the sky. He was originally lying on the ground. When he suddenly changed his posture to meet the enemy, he was caught off guard. Furthermore, Chu Yang's attack was like a thunderbolt. It was so sudden that he did not have time to react. Chu Yang did not wait for him to fall completely. He hooked his right hand and grabbed the man's collar, lifting him up. The moment he landed on the ground, he stomped his feet and jumped up like a spring. More than a dozen crossbow arrows were nailed to the spot where his body had just landed. Chu Yang's body had just jumped up when his feet slammed into a tree. With a loud thud, the tree shook violently. Branches flew everywhere like rain. Chu Yang's body shot out like an arrow leaving the bow. That man's body was close to 200 jin, but when he was grabbed by Chu Yang, it was as light as a feather. It did not affect his speed at all. The rain of arrows was like a waterfall, flying past his front and back. However, Chu Yang did not look at where those arrows came from. He only swayed his body to dodge them. His black clothes were torn to shreds by the arrows, but his skin was not scratched at all. They had clearly seen an arrow pierce through his body, but the next moment, that arrow had already pierced through his clothes. Chu Yang's momentum did not change at all. He was actually moving faster and faster. These people were clearly wary of the person Chu Yang was carrying. They tried their best to avoid that person with every arrow they fired. This made it very convenient for Chu Yang. It also made him even more certain. This person's identity was definitely not simple. Chu Yang's feet continued to stomp on the trees as he shuttled through the dense forest. He was actually as fast as lightning. Swish, swish, swish. Most of the arrows nailed into the trees. In just a breath's time, Chu Yang's afterimages were still moving behind him. However, he was already almost out of the forest. An angry shout came from the front. 3 or 4 people jumped out at the same time and slashed with their sabers. They blocked Chu Yang's path. Chu Yang's eyes flashed. Then he suddenly stomped his feet. His straightforward movement had strangely changed into a straight upward movement. He leaped 30 feet and arrived above these people's heads. Then, his feet fiercely stomped on the trunk of a big tree behind him. The big tree shook as if it was spasming. Chu Yang and the big man flew out like a meteor. They left the forest and entered the wilderness. The people lying in ambush could no longer hold back. They revealed themselves and chased after them from all directions. Behind the black masks, everyone's eyes had already lost their calm and coldness. They were filled with anxiety. They had originally planned to wait for the 8 experts to rush out and hold back the majority of the enemy's forces. Then they would rush out and kill Du Shiqing. Then they would scatter. He did not expect a hothead to barge in and grab the commander's vital point. Now, their plan was completely ruined. Everyone was angry, but at the same time, they were also confused. How can the accuracy be so accurate when so many people are here? He grabbed the most important person in the first move? Could it be that he knows how to calculate? What the hell is going on? Chapter 52. The man in Chu Yang's hand was still unconscious and did not know what was happening. Chu Yang did not want to kill him. It was not that Chu Yang did not dare to kill. Killing people was a piece of cake for Chu Yang. His first priority was to solve the crisis in front of him. His second priority was to figure out where these people came from. These people were most likely from Iron Cloud. They were most likely the men of sacrifice who supported Tai Butian. Only these people did not want Du Shiqing to come to Iron Cloud. If Du Shiqing's miraculous hands really helped Tai Shiqing recover, then Iron Cloud Nation would fall into an awkward situation of one country with 2 rulers. No matter how close the father and son worked together, their subordinates would not necessarily think so. Right now, Tai Butian had become Iron Cloud's spiritual pillar and savior, their only hope. Tai Shiqing's recovery would greatly affect Tai Butian's prestige and the morale of the entire army. This was because no army would be loyal to 2 leaders at the same time. If that was the case, then Iron Cloud Nation would have to face Wuxia Ro, this kind of matchless hero without a doubt. If it was really these people, then Chu Yang could not kill them. Compared to Great Zhao, Ironclad's power was already at a disadvantage. No power should be given up. These men of sacrifice were the treasures of the army. If these people were killed, at least one thing was certain. At least one army would be in chaos. Whether or not it would affect the entire war situation, it would at least affect one part of the war. Therefore, since Chu Yang wanted to reverse fate and help Tai Butian defeat Diwu Qingro, he could not bear to kill these people. Chu Yang's figure rushed out of the forest like a meteor. Behind him, a large group of men in black chased after him. Chu Yang did not care at all. His body rose and fell, and he was already in between the two sides. While he was still in midair, he shouted, "If you still want his life, then all of you stop." After he finished speaking, his body landed on the ground. He staggered and rolled on the ground with that person. He suddenly stood up and lost his balance again and fell to the ground. His face was red as he gasped for breath. Suddenly, he coughed and spat out a mouthful of blood on the ground in front of him. From the beginning to the end, he had been holding his breath and had not relaxed at all. The shock to his internal organs was really unimaginable. At this moment, he had just taken his first breath, but his entire body had gone limp, as if he had no strength left in his body. However, the first thing he did was to place the tip of his sword on the burly man's neck. Cold light flashed. He knelt on the ground just like that, holding the burly man's hand and holding his sword horizontally. He was gasping for breath and in an extremely sorry state, but his eyes were as calm and cold as ice. No one doubted that as long as they didn't do as he said, he would definitely chop off the head of this burly man. The situation was already very dangerous. Even though Manager Gao was not at a disadvantage, it was impossible for him to save Du Shiqing. The other side knew that they were no match for the tall old man, so they fought without any regard for their own safety. He tried his best to stall him. Although all of them were injured, they refused to back down. The other two had already jumped onto the carriage. Out of the 8 guards who had accompanied him, 4 of them were already lying on the ground. In the next moment, they would be able to break into the carriage and grab Du Shiqing. However, at this moment, the situation suddenly reversed. It was as if someone had cast a spell on them. They all stared blankly at the young man who had suddenly rushed out. For a long time, they did not make a sound. This young man was in a very sorry state. His clothes were in tatters, and he looked like he was out of breath. The corner of his mouth was stained with blood, and he looked like he was on the verge of death. If it was just one person shouting, then the next moment he would have been greeted with a sword. However, the person he was holding in his hand let everyone know that he was not joking. Even though he was gasping for breath, the sword in his hand did not move an inch. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. "Let him go!" The leader of the masked men immediately recognized the person Chu Yang was holding. He could not help but angrily roar. At this moment he even felt like he was dreaming. How could this be? Wasn't the general in a heavily guarded place? 100 blood iron death soldiers, 8 martial masters, 20 martial warriors, and the rest were all martial disciples. Even the weakest one had a grade. Furthermore, there were siege crossbows and 50 divine archers. Such a powerful force could only be gathered by emptying an entire army. They had fully intended to crush the number 1 divine doctor here like a mountain smashing a mosquito. How could the general fall into the hands of the enemy? In a dark night, in a dense forest, and the general was in the center of everyone's heart. He was protected in all directions. How could he appear here? "Let him go!" Chu Yang panted heavily and laughed. "If it were you, would you let him go? You have only captured an insignificant person among us, and you want to threaten us? Ridiculous." Even though the leader of the masked men was anxious, his tone had already calmed down. "Insignificant person?" Chu Yang laughed and said, "So he is just an insignificant person?" Suddenly, his hand moved, and the tip of his sword made a cut on the man's shoulder. Immediately, blood spurted out. The masked men in black were shocked. One of them even took a step forward with concern. "What are you doing?" The leader of the masked men in black said angrily. Chu Yang held his sword and looked at him from the corner of his eyes. He said with annoyance, When you said he is an insignificant person, it made me very upset. I can't even hold my sword steadily. Besides, since he is just an insignificant person, you guys continue. Ha, let's divide the work clearly. You guys kill him, I will kill him. As he said, the long sword in his hand moved in a circle. The tip of the sword slowly but firmly pierced into the man's arm. Chu Yang's eyes were full of ridicule. He looked at the masked men in black with provocation. He let the blood flow along the tip of the sword and onto his body. Wait! The leader of the masked men in black finally couldn't take it anymore. He stepped forward and asked, "What do you want?" "Very simple. Retreat. Let us go." Chu Yang's panting finally calmed down. He slowly stood up and said shakily, "As long as we are safe, I will let this insignificant person go." Ha! When he said the words insignificant person, he deliberately emphasized it and slowed down his tone. He was full of ridicule. "You should first pull out your sword." The leader of the masked men in black angrily said, "Torturing people like this, what kind of hero are you?" "I have never been a hero, and I am definitely not a hero." Chu Yang slowly pulled out his sword and said coldly, "Right now, I only have one goal, to arrive at Iron Cloud Citadel safely and quietly. I do not want to see anything else." "I agree," the leader of the masked men in black said straightforwardly, "but how do I know whether I should trust you or not? How can I trust you?" Chu Yang said coldly, "Until now, I have not taken off his mask. Is this not enough?" The masked men in black shook their bodies and said, "Yes, it is enough." Not taking off the mask meant that the other side did not want to make a big deal out of this and left a way out for both sides. Thus, there was room to turn the situation around. If the mask was taken off, with the general's identity, it would be difficult for the other side not to recognize him. At that time, the only option left was to kill him to silence him. He would also have to pay with the general's life. Most importantly, as long as Fire Saber Great Master Gao Weiqing wanted to leave, they would not be able to stop him. Du Shiqing was invited by Grand Elder Bu Tian of Iron Cloud with Great Zhao's permission. As long as Gao Weiqing escaped and spread the news, it would be over. This could become a serious diplomatic incident between the two countries. Plus, they would become traitors of Iron Cloud. Chapter 53. The large man waved his hand and let out a whistle. The 10 masked large men in black immediately lined up neatly in formation. In the blink of an eye, they formed an impenetrable wall in front of everyone. Their imposing manner showed that they were elites. Manager Gao and the remaining 4 guards felt like they were dreaming. Seeing that the situation was precarious and that the enemy was about to succeed, everyone felt incomparably angry and sullen. Just when they were powerless to reverse the situation, Chu Yang suddenly came out with a person in his hand. Moreover, the first thing he said was for both sides to stop. Yet, the other party had actually stopped. Now that they heard what they said, they realized that the person they caught was actually the commander of this group. Isn't this too much of a coincidence? Isn't this too awesome? In a moment of life and death, he went into the enemy's camp alone and captured the enemy's leader. Under the encirclement, he calmly returned. With the strength of one person, he turned the situation around in an instant. Is this a myth? Or a legend? It seems like they have never heard of such a thing in real life. Everyone's gaze towards Chu Yang suddenly changed. There is one thing I want to say to him. The leader of the masked men looked at Chu Yang. I want to make sure that he is still alive. No problem. Chu Yang readily agreed. He slapped his palm on the big man's back. From his palm, a cold yin energy entered his body. The burly man shuddered and immediately sobered up. Seeing his situation clearly, he was furious. He struggled and shouted, "What are you waiting for? Why aren't you killing them?" "But you, don't worry about me," the big man said angrily. "What time is it? Why do you still care about my life?" "Your Excellency, your mask has not been taken off," Chu Yang gently reminded him. "Moreover, you have already lost. In this situation, even if you gave the order to perish together with us, do you think it would be possible? Would your subordinates do it? The big man choked and angrily cursed, "Bastard! Or you lost? What qualifications do you have to say that we lost?" "My qualifications are," Chu Yang arrogantly said, "now that you have fallen into my hands, I'm the meat and you're the meat." The burly man panted heavily in silence. His eyes were filled with intense humiliation and unwillingness. Suddenly, he twisted his neck and slammed into the sword. Cries of surprise rang out. Chu Yang sneered. He lifted him up with one hand and spun him around. Then he kicked his butt and said fiercely, "If you don't listen to me, even if you die, I will take off your mask, strip you naked, and hang you on the flagpole of Iron Cloud Citadel. You can try and see if I can do it." The burly man trembled and finally calmed down. He wasn't afraid of death, but Chu Yang's method was downright vicious. With his reputation in Iron Cloud Nation, if he was humiliated like this even after death, he would not be able to bear it. Not to mention, there was also the prestige of the clan and the reputation of the military. Forget it. He let out a long sigh. All you want is to reach Iron Cloud Citadel safely. I promise you that I will not stop you. But I don't trust you, Chu Yang said coldly. Therefore, I need you to personally escort us. The burly man suddenly turned around and glared at Chu Yang. Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat. This pair of eyes were filled with the power to seize life and death, as well as endless coldness. There was also a kind of arrogance and disdain for life and death. This was definitely a person of high status and power. No need to glare at me. Once we are safe, I will let you go. I know what you are worried about. Don't worry, I will not make things difficult for you, and I will not expose your identity. Even I will not. Chu Yang said calmly, I don't trust your promise, but right now, you can only trust me. He paused for a moment and said lightly, You have no other choice. The burly man stared at him for a long time. Then he suddenly snorted and waved his hand, You can all leave. Go and play with them. Big brother. The leader of the group in black stepped forward and suddenly threw his saber on the ground. He opened his arms and walked over, Let me exchange with my big brother. I promise, I will listen to you on the way. Don't worry, although my big brother's weight is different, we will definitely keep our promise. Fuck off. The burly man in Chu Yang's hand was furious. He said furiously, You motherfucker, are you trying to anger me to death? When we get back, I will kill your whole family and wipe out your motherfucking clan. You dare to mess around in front of me? Get out. Bring good weapons, motherfucker. We still need to use them. Get out. The burly man scolded angrily. What? You bastards are very happy to see me in such a sorry state, aren't you? Why aren't you getting out? Under his scolding, the dozens of people on the opposite side finally retreated reluctantly. You listen to me. On the way, if you dare to touch a hair of my big brother, we will risk the destruction of our clan and search the ends of the earth to tear you into pieces. The leader of the black-clothed masked men shouted in a stern voice. Then he walked away, turning his head 3 times with each step he took. Not long after, he disappeared into the dense forest. Seeing that they had finally retreated, Chu Yang finally used up all his strength and sat on the ground. His hands were trembling. He barely reached into his clothes and grabbed the purple crystal jade essence. He wanted to use his martial arts to restore his energy. A domineering thought rose up. Tribulation sword spirit came out and stopped him. Chu Yang was speechless. He cursed in his heart, Motherfucker, it's fine if you didn't use your strength in the battle just now, but now you don't let me recover. You didn't use Tribulation Sword's power in the battle just now. How can I help you? I'm just assisting you. I'm not trying to take over your body for you. Whether it's your body or your mind, the one in control is always you, Chu Yang, not Tribulation Sword. You need to understand this. Besides, only by completely letting go of your body and relying on your own strength to recover when you're exhausted can you break through your limits and increase your power. If you let this damn jade that's neither cold nor hot in summer nor hot in winter help you recover, then how are you going to break through? Chu Yang didn't expect Tribulation Sword to reply to him. He didn't expect this guy to suddenly come out and say so much. He couldn't help but be stunned. The purple crystal jade essence was a peerless treasure. In the sword spirit's mouth, it became a damned jade, which is neither cold nor hot in summer and is useless in winter and is useless in summer and is useless in winter. When you solve the mystery of your origin, the first thing I will do is swallow this damned jade. So much energy, but I can only look at it and can't absorb it. It's really annoying. The sword spirit said a few words angrily. Without waiting for Chu Yang's reply, it fell silent again. Damn. Chu Yang was stunned. It turned out that this guy had always been coveting this jade essence. Now you can absorb it too. No one will stop you from absorbing it, Chu Yang said tentatively. Then what will you rely on to find your parents? To walk around the world naked? Tribulation sword spirit roared angrily and muttered, I haven't found a suitable host for tens of thousands of years. Now that I finally found one, it's actually such a stubborn idiot. Who are you calling an idiot? Chu Yang was completely enraged. His little universe suddenly exploded. He shouted angrily, his eyebrows furrowed, and his hair stood on end. In his previous life, no one dared to call him an idiot. How can you be so stubborn with a sword? This is intolerable. I didn't scold you. A confused voice sounded. Manager Gao approached Chu Yang with a complicated expression. He was about to thank him when Chu Yang suddenly opened his eyes and said, Who are you calling an idiot? Chapter 54. Chu Yang immediately felt that something was wrong. He smiled awkwardly and said, I was not talking about you. Manager Gao turned his head and looked left and right in a daze. Not talking about me? It seems like there is no one else around here besides me, so this guy is a psychopath. The burly man who was lying on the ground rolled his eyes and sighed sorrowfully. To think that this old hero has been able to rule the world and command the wind and clouds for his entire life. Yet he actually fell into the hands of a lunatic. This really makes me feel unsatisfied and depressed. You are the psychopath. Chu Yang rolled his eyes and suddenly thought, why does this narcissist sound so familiar? Could it be that this guy is the same as Tan Tan? At this time, the remaining 4 guards also came closer. 4 of their brothers had died in the hands of this man. They looked at this masked man with an unfriendly expression. You guys get lost. Don't disturb this old man's mood. The man said carelessly, if you don't want to die, try and touch me. This guy is still so arrogant after becoming a captive. Du Shiqing walked out of the carriage. His expression was surprisingly calm. He nodded at Chu Yang and said, Chu Yang, this time, it is all thanks to you. Pausing for a moment, he sighed and said, if it weren't for you, I'm afraid this old man would have been buried here. No matter how much kindness this old man has shown to your family, after this, we're even. Du Shiqing smiled and said, so, you don't need to take it to heart. A doctor has the heart of a parent. To a doctor, treating a patient is not a life-saving grace, but a profession. But you saved me. This is a life-saving grace. Chu Yang's heart was filled with admiration. For Du Shiqing to be able to say these words, he was worthy of his title as the #1 genius doctor. He said, Senior Du is too polite. I hope that Senior Du, Manager Gao, and the other brothers can understand that I acted on my own initiative and do not break the promise between us. Of course. Du Shiqing nodded and said with a smile, this person's safety and identity also determines our safety. This old man naturally will not ignore the big picture. The man snorted and said, I don't think you guys would dare. Then, he turned his head and looked at Chu Yang with a pair of sharp eyes. Little, there are so many people here. Why did you only catch me? Chu Yang smiled and said, because you're the most important. If I were to capture someone else, would you retreat? The burly man laughed. Although his face was covered, the carefree and heroic tone in his voice was not concealed in the slightest. He said, then how do you know that I am the most important? This is what I don't understand the most. I didn't want to tell you this. But seeing that you're not a bad person, I'll make an exception this time. Chu Yang thought for a while. Then, he tilted his head and smiled, Because your subordinates have placed you in the most important position. Bullshit. I have always eaten and lived with my brethren. I have always fought on the battlefield, besieging cities and seizing land. I have always been at the forefront of every battle. How can you say I have the most important position? The big man angrily said, "You are talking nonsense. Or maybe you did. But they didn't do that, and they didn't think that way either." Chu Yang coldly said, "An army without a general is like a sheet of loose sand. But if a general takes the lead in everything, he will also become the army's biggest constraint. He will become the biggest factor in defeat." He looked at the burly man somewhat mockingly and said, "Although this general thinks that he has done well, he doesn't know that because he has done well, he will lead the entire army to a dead end." The burly man's eyes revealed a thoughtful look. He said, "Then, how can there be no conflict between the two? A leader without a backbone will never be a good leader. A leader with too much backbone will also not be a good general. There needs to be a balance point." Chu Yang lightly said, "I have never been a general, and I have never led an army. I don't know where this balance point is, so I can't give you any advice." The burly man suddenly froze. He lowered his head, frowned, and thought hard for a long time. Then he suddenly raised his head and said seriously, "I've learned something." Chu Yang was actually very interested in this guy who had been captured by him. Although this person looked rough, he was actually very meticulous. Plus, this guy's martial strength was not high. He was only a martial warrior. At most, he was only level 4 or 5, but he had 8 martial masters under his command. Martial warrior and martial master, the difference of one word was an insurmountable gap. With a low level of cultivation, he had to lead a group of people whose cultivation was much higher than his. This was even more contradictory. But this guy was able to make so many martial masters obediently respect him as their boss. It was clear that he was not ordinary. Plus, he was loyal and righteous, and his orders were strict. It was clear that he had a very high military prestige. There should not be many generals like this in Iron Cloud Nation. I must keep them. Thinking about this, Chu Yang looked at the 4 corpses lying on the ground and the remaining people's faces filled with grief and indignation. He could not help but sigh. The world was so helpless. Seeing the enemy captured, they still could not do anything. Perhaps this was the struggle between 2 countries. However, Chu Yang still had some contempt for this. Right now, he was an outsider. He was not close to either side. There was no doubt that Du Shiqing was a good person. However, the purpose of this trip was contrary to Chu Yang's goal of reversing fate. Tai Shicheng's illness, to a certain extent, directly affected the rise and fall of Iron Cloud Nation. If Iron Cloud Nation was destroyed, then Beyond the Heavens sect would not be safe. If Beyond the Heavens sect was not safe, then Chu Yang's master and brothers would certainly die. Mo Qingwu would also not be able to escape. Therefore, even though Du Shiqing was a good person, Chu Yang could not support him. These assassins were not necessarily bad people. Their goal was the same as Chu Yang's. Chu Yang could not kill them. But Chu Yang knew that if he was one of the 4 remaining guards, he would definitely kill this person. He would not have any scruples because of anyone's promise or the overall situation. 4 of his brothers were killed. If he did not take revenge, could he still be considered a man? But these 4 guards only stood there in grief and indignation. Even when they were not shouted at, they did not take any action. Chu Yang despised these people who did not have any courage. Even if he was the one who made the promise, he still despised them. Looking around, Chu Yang sat down cross-legged. Right now, the most important thing was to recover his strength. Holding his breath, he used all his strength to circulate the remaining energy in his dantian. In fact, his dantian was already empty. He used all his strength to search for the remaining energy in his meridians. It was so little that it was pitiful. But this time, it was the first time Chu Yang used Plundering Heaven Divine technique to recover. Now that he had left Beyond the Heavens sect, he could do whatever he wanted. In his previous life, even though he practiced Plundering Heaven Divine technique, he still did not understand. This technique was obviously faster than normal techniques. Did it belong to the category of demonic techniques? After all, This was a very strange technique. Manager Gao saw that Chu Yang was recovering his energy, so he dismissed the idea of talking to him. He only stood to the side to protect him. But in the next moment, his eyes widened. No way. In such a short time, he had already entered a meditative state? He had only just sat down, okay? Looking at Chu Yang's sparkling face, Manager Gao rubbed his eyes in disbelief. Meditating, calming the mind, gathering the energy, moving the dantian, passing through the meridians, and then slowly entering a meditative state? Since ancient times, who could break out of this category? I have been a saber great master for dozens of years. Even though I have not broken through to revered saber, I am still considered a wily old fox, okay? But even now, I still have to follow the same set of rules. Especially after being injured, it is even more difficult. How could this guy enter a meditative state as soon as he sat down? Manager Gao's eyes widened. He suddenly felt that his worldview had been turned upside down. Chu Yang manipulated the remaining energy in his meridians and slowly gathered it into his dantian. Then, following the plundering heaven divine technique's path, it slowly passed through his meridians. Chapter 55. At the same time, the tip of the sword constantly emitted a strange power, constantly nourishing Chu Yang's meridians. In his meridians, the power of the golden blood root, which had been quietly protecting his veins, was suddenly stimulated at this moment. With this power, it slowly integrated into Chu Yang's meridians. After a full cycle, the energy from the tip of the sword suddenly exploded, causing Chu Yang's meridians to swell with a comfortable feeling. Outside his body, his clothes fluttered, and a black mist that was hard to see clearly gushed out from his mouth and nose at the same time. Chu Yang suddenly felt relaxed. Manager Gao stood in front of him, dumbfounded. What did I just see? God, please save me. I'm sick. My eyes can't take it anymore. He sat down and entered a meditative state. In less than a breath's time, his injuries were healed. Then, in less than the time it took to drink a cup of tea, he broke through? How is this possible? This strange phenomenon caused this fire saber grandmaster, who had been famous for many years, to be completely confused. Chu Yang slowly opened his eyes. A sharp sword light flashed before his eyes, and they returned to normal. But as soon as he opened his eyes, the big man and the tall old man both felt a sharp pain in their eyes. It was as if a red-hot steel needle had pierced their eyes. These two were the type of people who did not care about the laws of heaven. But at this moment, they felt a sense of fear towards this young man in front of them. They felt as if an ancient demon had suddenly broken his seal and came to this world with a ferocity that could destroy heaven and earth. Another breakthrough, 4th-level martial warrior. If the tall old man knew that this guy had just broken through martial disciple and reached martial warrior 5 days ago, his eyes would probably pop out of their sockets. Then he would probably suffer from a heart attack and die from foaming at the mouth. You can break through like this? What the fuck? Even so, Manager Gao's eyes were still wide open. His hands were trembling, and he did not know what to do. He looked at Chu Yang with eyes full of jealousy. Comparing oneself to others was really infuriating. Every time he broke through, it was as if he was being skinned alive. He struggled for many days. This guy actually seemed to enjoy breaking through. How do you feel? The tall old man's heart was pounding as he asked. I only broke through 1 level. Chu Yang smacked his lips and frowned. Why is it so slow? This is not right. Manager Gao staggered and trembled twice before asking, when was the last time you broke through? Could it be that this guy had been stuck in this bottleneck for many years? If that was the case, then this situation was understandable. Chu Yang scratched his head and rolled his eyes. He said with uncertainty, it should be 4 days ago? Or was it 5 days ago? That's too long. Something is not right? Old man Gao's eyes rolled back, his lips trembled, and he pointed at him with his skinny finger. Suddenly, he sat down on the ground. His wrinkled face turned red, and all the blood in his body rushed to his head. After a long time, he stood up dizzily, as if he was in a dream. He turned around and left with a pale face. Manager Gao's Manager Gao. Chu Yang was surprised and asked, Manager Gao, what's wrong? Manager Gao moved his legs as if he was in a dream and muttered, I'm going to sleep. I haven't slept in a few days. I'm hallucinating. Then he staggered away. The masked man sighed and shook his head. He sighed from the bottom of his heart. When I was in Ironcloud Citadel, I saw a few pretty boys posing in front of a restaurant. They were so pretentious, as if they didn't care about money. I thought they were too pretentious. But today, I finally know what it means to be pretentious. With this level of skill, they should be the ancestors of those little bastards. Chu Yang was speechless. What I said was the truth, okay? He remembered that in his previous life, he didn't just go up one level. He often went up several levels in a row like a rocket. However, the feeling and comprehension of this kind of leveling up was definitely different. Step by step, steady and steady, that is the way of the king. Every step, there must be an understanding of each step. This kind of accumulation is the peak. Did you feel good about the pig-like ascension in your previous life? If it wasn't for me suppressing it for you, you would have already gone up. Why couldn't you reach the peak in your previous life? It was because you lacked the understanding of each step. If you eat until you're fat, the only result is that you'll choke to death. Do you understand, idiot? In his mind, an arrogant voice spoke disdainfully and with a tone of disappointment. Chu Yang was startled and immediately understood. Yes, practicing martial arts is like a person's life. From young to old, slowly understanding and slowly accumulating knowledge is the right path. If you give a 3-year-old child medicine to make him reach the age of 30, would he really have the mind of a 30-year-old? No wonder such a powerful force could only go up one level. It was because Tribulation Sword was suppressing it to give him time to comprehend. You're still wasting time. Why don't you hurry up and find some supplements? With the speed of an ant, when will you become strong? Tonic? Chu Yang thought blankly, what tonic? Things like 7-star white magnolia, spirit ginseng, ethereal purple ganoderma, 10,000 years yellow essence, and so on are barely enough. If it really doesn't work, purple crystal jade, black gold iron, star steel, nightmare silver, and diamond sand will also work. Chu Yang's hands and feet trembled as he fell to the ground. Suddenly, he cursed, Motherfucker, what are these things? Do you think these are cabbages? These are all things from legends. Finding 1 or 2 grams is already a great fortune, and you want to talk about 10,000 pounds? Are you talking nonsense because you ate too much? Manager Gao and Du Shiqing, who had already walked far away, turned around in surprise. Seeing Chu Yang suddenly become angry, they could not understand what was going on. The big man across from Chu Yang shouted angrily, Bastard! I just want to eat a few pounds of beef. I'm always hungry, do you understand? Motherfucker, you really think I'm a prisoner? Bastard, what kind of legend is this? Is your family's beef a legend? You're just a bumpkin who has never seen the world. It turned out that this guy was hungry and wanted to make a request of Chu Yang. Chu Yang turned his head, bared his teeth, and shouted angrily, Shut up. If you keep screaming, I'll strip you naked and put you in front of the horses. Then I'll feed them aphrodisiac. In an instant, Chu Yang's eyes flashed fiercely. As soon as these words came out, the big man's body trembled violently. He opened his mouth wide and looked at Chu Yang in despair. His face was pale. In that moment, he was so angry that his heart was beating like thunder, but he did not dare to show it. He finally understood what kind of hooligan he had fallen into. Listening to what he said, did it sound like something a normal person would say? These are the things you need to upgrade your calamity sword. In his mind, the voice laughed happily, Little brat, I'll tell you. First, get some good things and open the calamity sword space. You will be pleasantly surprised. You really are a waste. After so long, you still haven't opened the calamity sword's innate ability. Calamity sword space? Chu Yang was stunned. Yes, calamity sword space. Wait, so, you're not the sword spirit? Chu Yang asked, puzzled. Yes, I am the calamity sword. But right now, I can't merge with the Calamity Sword. The voice was full of frustration. Damn bastard. It's fine to test the sword master, but why did he have to separate the sword and the soul? Damn it, damn it. Who? Chu Yang only felt his heart beat faster. Perhaps the sword spirit was cursing the mysterious person who created the Calamity Sword. I've forgotten who he is now. The voice sighed in annoyance. Only when you get the 7th fragment of the broken sword can you merge with the sword and the soul. Only when you get all the fragments can I fully recover. Look for it patiently. Those things are not hard to find. There are plenty of them in this world. But what if I can't find them? Chu Yang asked weakly. The Calamity Sword will not be destroyed. You can look for it slowly. How can you not find it after thousands of years? After the sword spirit said this, there was no more sound. Chapter 56. Restoring the Calamity Sword didn't seem difficult. But now, it was tens of thousands of years later. Maybe it was easy tens of thousands of years ago. The things you said were everywhere, but do you know how hard it is to find them now? Isn't this forcing people to die? Hey, I want to eat. The big man shouted again, but this time, his tone was much softer. Even if you're a captive, you still need to eat, right? You can't starve me like this, right? Shut up. Chu Yang was in a bad mood. He suddenly grabbed the man's collar and said fiercely, "Don't think that I don't dare to kill you. I didn't kill you because you're still a little useful. But if you wear out my patience, it won't be difficult to cut off your head. Don't think that I'm afraid of death." The man shouted angrily, but when he saw the evil light in Chu Yang's eyes, he suddenly shuddered and didn't say anything else. Heavens, this guy is a demon. As the saying goes, a wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Chu Yang stood up and walked to the fire. He cut off a horse's hind leg and skewered it on the 2 arrows on the ground. Then he put it on the fire and roasted it. The fire jumped, illuminating Chu Yang's face. It was indescribably strange. Chu Yang threw the roasted horse leg in front of the masked man. Horse meat is too sour. I want to eat beef. The man said angrily. I think you look like beef. Chu Yang curled his lips. Eat it or not. He turned and left. The man's breath was stuck in his throat, and he almost fainted. Looking at the horse meat in his hand, he really wanted to throw this black thing on the ground. But he knew very well that if he really threw it on the ground, he was destined to starve. This guy definitely wouldn't be merciful. With a sigh, he bit down hard on the horse's leg and chewed hard. As he chewed on the horse's meat, his teeth actually chattered and made a crunching sound. It was as if he wasn't chewing horse meat, but this guy called Chu Yang. On the other side, Chu Yang was cleaning up the arrows on the ground. He wanted to tidy up a space for himself to set up a tent and have a good sleep. However, after he collected a few arrows, a strange expression suddenly appeared on his face, which was facing away from the others. Then he took out a tent. Surprisingly, he didn't pick up the arrows on the ground. Instead, he chose a place with the densest number of arrows and set up the tent. This caused everyone to feel extremely puzzled. In the tent, Chu Yang was already shocked to the point of disbelief. This was because he discovered that when he was collecting those ownerless arrows, the sword tip of the Calamity Sword in his body suddenly had a sharp reaction. At this moment, the tip of the sword followed his meridians to his finger. The moment it came into contact with the arrow, there was only a slight pop sound. The arrow in Chu Yang's hand had already shattered into pieces. Just shatter. Furthermore, it was directly turned into dust. This was an arrow made of fine steel. This type of arrow had the most destructive power, and the distance it could travel was also the longest, because its entire front half was made of fine steel. However, the second half of the arrow was made of high-quality ironwood. At the end of the arrow was the arrowhead that maintained its balance. The moment Chu Yang came into contact with it, the high-quality steel was silently crushed into powder. How could Chu Yang not be shocked? Finally, the tent was set up. Chu Yang immediately went in. Looking at the densely packed arrows on the ground, Chu Yang's eyes widened. He tried to touch it with his finger again. Sure enough, the tip of Calamity Sword that had already reached his finger suddenly released a suction force. Then, a little bit of black iron appeared on the tip of Chu Yang's finger, and the half of the fine steel arrow turned into dust. What was going on? He had never heard of the Calamity Sword having such a function. Chu Yang's eyes widened. By the time all the fine steel arrows in the tent had turned into dust, the iron shavings in Chu Yang's hand had already turned into an iron ball the size of a fingertip. Using his internal energy, he saw that the sword tip of the Calamity Sword, which was originally shining, had already turned black in a small area. If one didn't look carefully, they really wouldn't be able to see it. What's going on? Chu Yang asked in his heart. This is fine steel, pure steel. What the Calamity Sword swallows is iron essence. In his dandan, the voice said lazily, "What's so strange about this? Fine steel? Iron essence?" The Calamity Sword is the #1 divine object in the world. It can swallow anything, including the human body. The voice explained, but what the Calamity Sword swallows is the most essential part. For fine steel, it's iron essence. And what's left after the Calamity Sword swallows is iron essence. Although it's slightly inferior, for ordinary steel, it's still the most essential part of the essence. The voice said, "This is the benefit of the Calamity Sword's owner." After a pause, it said, "One of them." One of the benefits? Chu Yang's mind spun quickly. Could it be that there are more benefits? Chu Yang's eyes suddenly became bright. That's right. For anything, as long as it's in your hands, the Calamity Sword will automatically extract its essence. And the parts that the Calamity Sword doesn't need will also be purified and given to you to use. When the Calamity Sword fully recovers and completes, then those things will all be yours. However, those things are too far away. You don't need to know about them now. I see. Chu Yang held the small piece of iron in his hand thoughtfully. Anything can be swallowed? Of course. Between heaven and earth, there is nothing that cannot be swallowed, including the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. However, right now, the Calamity Sword only has the first fragment, so it can only swallow some ordinary metals and spirit medicines. Then, can this iron essence be used to make weapons? Nonsense. As long as there is enough, you can control the sword point and have it help you make any weapon. This kind of iron essence is a treasure that ordinary martial artists can only dream of. Do you understand? Using this kind of iron essence to make weapons would be dozens of times stronger than the trash you use. Chu Yang sat on the ground and pondered. At this moment, he suddenly had a clear plan. Going to Iron Cloud Nation through Du Shiqing was a last-minute decision. It was like forcing a duck onto a perch. Before this, he did not have any plans. He only knew how to take one step at a time. But at this moment, he suddenly had a complete plan. Or should the plan be like this? The heavy piece of iron in his hand seemed to give him some kind of inspiration. His eyes suddenly lit up. Chapter 57. Looking at Chu Yang's expression, the masked man next to him smiled proudly and said, "My brothers are not bad, right?" In this group, because of his special status, even Manager Gao and Du Shiqing did not dare to be rude to him. Only Chu Yang was rude to him. But he insisted on following Chu Yang. Along the way, he talked with Chu Yang. Even though he was sometimes angered by Chu Yang, he did not go near anyone else. He clearly knew that even though Chu Yang was rude to him, he was the only one in this group who did not want him to die. As for the others, even though they were polite to him, they all wanted to kill him. If they were to stab him when they were safe, that was definitely not impossible. Only Chu Yang would not do that. Good soldiers. Chu Yang looked at the black flood next to him and said in a low voice, "Of course they are good soldiers." The masked man said proudly, "Otherwise, how could they guard Yang? Fuck your grandpa. You dare to trick me?" Chu Yang was speechless. He rolled his eyes and said powerlessly, "Do you think that I would be so despicable? How dare he try to trick you?" He turned his neck and said disdainfully, "If I want to know anything about you, a pack of aphrodisiac will tell me everything." The burly man shuddered as he stared at the beast-like young man with a dumbfounded expression. He wisely chose not to speak any further, because he suddenly remembered what Chu Yang said the other day, "I will strip you naked and put you in front of the horses. Then I will feed them aphrodisiac." Thinking about it, he suddenly felt his blood run cold. If that was really the case, then he might really surrender. That morning, they finally saw a big city in front of them. Du Shiqing, Manager Gao, and the others let out a sigh of relief. Here, they were already in the heart of Iron Cloud Nation. There were more and more people, and the government offices were all connected. Basically, there was no chance of being assassinated here. Because if Du Shiqing died in this place, Taibu Tian would be furious. All the officials along the way would be in trouble. Therefore, they would all treat Du Shiqing as their master. Sure enough, at the city gate, a group of people came out of the city. Clearly, they were here to welcome Du Shiqing. More than 100 people turned their heads at the same time. Manager Gao also turned his head, his eyes filled with killing intent. If he killed this burly man here, even the 100 or so people on the other side wouldn't be able to stop him. The atmosphere between the two sides suddenly became tense and strange. "It's time to let me go." The big man clearly sensed that Manager Gao and the others were up to no good. Before he could finish his sentence, he saw Chu Yang's hand shake and remove the seal on his body. Then, with a wave of his hand, the big man, who weighed more than 200 pounds, was sent flying. Manager Gao was one step slower. He glared at Chu Yang and angrily said, With a whoosh, the big man's body flew 70 to 80 feet away. With a whistle, a strong horse quickly rushed forward. The warrior on the horse reached out and caught the big man. Then, as the horse galloped, the big man's two legs were spread out and he sat steadily on the horse's back. More than 100 masked people in black cheered at the same time. Suddenly, the big man gave an order and all of them stopped their horses at the same time. Then, they turned around and circled around Du Shiqing's group. Behind the masks, there was a murderous look in their eyes that made people shiver. After the iron torrent circled around, the big man let out a long laugh and shouted, "You little bastard, we will meet again. Next time, I will strip you naked and feed you to the horses." As he spoke, he was very proud of himself. It was as if he was not ashamed of being captured and instead felt proud. Chu Yang couldn't help but be stunned. He felt ashamed of his own inferiority when it came to the thickness of this guy's skin. "Let's go." As he said this, his eyes slanted and looked at Manager Gao's group with evil intentions. He waved his hand and turned his horse around. Then, he took the lead and galloped away. The riders behind him closely followed, forming an iron torrent on the road. The iron torrent surged as the horses galloped away, leaving a trail of yellow smoke on the road. Along the way, the big man's bold laughter could be heard. "His grandmother, did the children prepare good wine for me? I have been tortured by that guy these past few days. I haven't changed my clothes for the past few days. My body is all white now." After a burst of laughter, whistles were heard one after another. It was chaos. Obviously, this group of people from top to bottom did not regard being captured as a disgrace. They also did not have any complaints about not being able to assassinate Du Shiqing. It was as if the big man's return was the best thing in the world. It did not matter if they could not complete the mission. "Why did you let him go?" Manager Gao raised his head and looked at Chu Yang. "A man without integrity cannot live." Chu Yang looked at him coldly and did not back down. "Besides, it was Senior Du who helped me. I escorted him here. It has nothing to do with you." He said slowly and disdainfully, "If you guys could have killed him the moment I caught him, I wouldn't have said anything. At the very least, I would have praised you guys for having a strong sense of brotherhood. At worst, we would have all become fugitives. But you waited until now to kill him. Manager Gao, did you get your title of Fire Saber Great Master because of this?" After he said this, the remaining 4 riders' faces turned red. They could not say anything. Manager Gao slowly nodded and said, "Good, good, good." He said the word "good" 3 times. His eyes became more and more fierce. Chu Yang coldly snorted and said proudly, What? You want to burn the bridge after crossing the river? You want to kill your savior? He only cared about his ultimate goal. As for what they thought, Chu Yang did not care. Gao Weiqing was startled. He stared at Chu Yang for a while and then turned around. Behind him, Du Shiqing sighed and said, "Manager Gao, Chu Yang did not do anything wrong in this matter. A real man should keep his word." The tall old man, who was walking away, paused for a moment. He turned around and said, "Yes, you are right." Chu Yang was very surprised. This was the first time he saw Manager Gao talk to Du Shiqing. He really did not expect Manager Gao to be so respectful to Du Shiqing. This kind of attitude was like a servant to his master. With Manager Gao's title of Fire Saber Great Master, this was very unusual. Chu Yang pretended to be indignant, but in his heart he was thinking, could it be that this Du Shiqing, was there something special about him? After walking for 2 days, they finally arrived at Iron Cloud Citadel. Along the way, they passed by a few counties that warmly welcomed Du Shiqing's group. However, Manager Gao and the others' attitude towards Chu Yang gradually became cold. Later, they even became disgusted with him. This guy was like a wolf that lived alone. Chu Yang did not mind, he was indifferent. Every day, he only discussed medical matters with Du Shiqing. Every time they passed by, it was very enriching. Chu Yang's perception was very high. Plus, there were some areas where he took a different approach to discuss, which gave Du Shiqing a new feeling. Because of this, the two of them were very happy to talk along the way. Chu Yang also took this opportunity to learn about this field that he did not understand in his previous life. In the future, no matter if he was fighting on the battlefield or wandering the world, this knowledge would always be useful. Du Shiqing's whereabouts were also reported to Iron Cloud Citadel 3 times a day. It was said that Iron Cloud's Tai Butian wanted to personally welcome Du Shiqing into the citadel. This kind of reception was very grand. They were still 30 miles away from Iron Cloud Citadel. Iron Cloud Citadel's banners fluttered in the wind as they rushed out of the citadel gate. They stood in 2 rows at the citadel gate, extending for about 5 miles. Then, a group of riders rushed out, creating a torrent on the road as they galloped. They did not stop until they were 10 miles away. Chapter 58. This young man in a white robe had a purple crown and a white face. His long eyebrows reached his temples, and his phoenix eyes were awe-inspiring. He was wearing a white cloak that covered his entire body. At first glance, he looked delicate, but the feeling he gave off was completely different from his appearance. He was just riding on a horse, but he gave off the feeling of looking down on the world. Tai Butian of Iron Cloud. He personally came out of the city to welcome Du Shiqing. At this moment, he was sitting on the horse with his right hand on his forehead. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the road in front of him. He was patiently waiting with a calm face. Dust rose in the distance, and the sound of wheels could be heard. A group of people appeared on the horizon. "They are here." Tai Butian turned around and jumped down from the horse. The white cloak still covered his entire body. He was not tall, but he did not give off the feeling of being short. Next to him, there were dozens of people waiting in formation. Their eyes were shining brightly, and their hands were on the hilts of their swords. They were protecting him from all directions. With this kind of formation, even if a martial king came to attack, Tai Butian would be able to retreat safely. At this moment, Du Shiqing was in a state of shock. "Senior Du, now that you have safely arrived at Iron Cloud, I should also take my leave." Chu Yang casually saluted, and his voice was very serious. Just like a hero who had accomplished something and was about to leave. Du Shiqing really did not expect Chu Yang to say goodbye at this moment. Could it be that he really escorted me here just to give me a ride? Just to repay a debt of gratitude? Not for anything else? Manager Gao and the 4 guards were also caught off guard and looked at Chu Yang. Chu Yang resolutely looked at Du Shiqing deeply. Ignoring Du Shiqing's pleas to stay, he turned around and left. His lonely figure looked very free and easy. It was as if he had completed the most important task in his heart and was relieved of a burden. Looking at his back, a faint sense of shame rose in everyone's hearts. It turned out that we really misunderstood him. He suddenly appeared and followed us for thousands of miles. If it were not for him, we would not have reached Iron Cloud. If it were not for him, we would have been completely annihilated in that forest. However, the moment he successfully arrived, he decided to leave. In fact, just 2 days ago, they had almost fought with him. What kind of ungrateful behavior was this? Chu Yang's departure left Du Shiqing and the others with the impression of a chivalrous hero. Everyone watched as he turned into a small black dot in front of them and then disappeared. They couldn't help but feel a little dazed. Chu Yang had come here to repay a debt of gratitude. This point had been confirmed after everyone had discussed it. However, everyone guessed that Chu Yang must have other motives. Using Du Shiqing to get to know the upper echelons of Iron Cloud and gain glory and wealth, was that his true goal? But at this moment, Chu Yang had used his actions to break their guesses, making them feel ashamed of themselves for using the heart of a villain to cross the heart of a monarch. But they didn't know that Chu Yang's departure was for the sake of better carrying out the plan. Manager Gao and the others didn't treat him unjustly. If he followed Du Shiqing into the city, he would naturally be able to see Tai Butian. However, his own status would not be favored. At most, he would become one of Tai Butian's many aides, and then bitterly look for opportunities, wait for opportunities, and stand out. Only then would he be able to slowly rise step by step. However, if there wasn't a suitable opportunity, they would continue to wait like this for a long time. Chu Yang couldn't wait. What was easily obtained would naturally not be cherished. This sentence applies to both men and women. It was applicable to love, wealth, and career. A wife is not as good as a concubine is not as good as a mistress, and a mistress is not as good as a mistress. What you can't get is always the best. Cough cough, Chu Yang has misunderstood. But this is the truth. Even though Chu Yang had taken the initiative to visit, it would never be as important as Tai Butian's repeated visits. The weight was also absolutely different. Therefore, the current Chu Yang was only building momentum for himself and also creating an opportunity for Tai Butian to visit him 3 times. Originally, when he had no other choice, Du Shiqing was his only shortcut. But now, the Calamity Sword's devouring made him change his mind. Since there was another way, he was not willing to just be a strategist. On Du Shiqing's side, he had already put in enough effort to leave a deep impression on him. This was an extraordinary ability. At the very least, as long as Tai Butian mentioned him, Du Shiqing could use the impression he left on him to influence Tai Butian. Now, what Chu Yang needed to do was to make Tai Butian mention him to Du Shiqing. Let Tai Butian take the initiative, and he had to appear unwilling and passive. As long as Tai Butian mentioned him, he would be able to take the initiative. He didn't have the confidence to reach the heavens in one step, but in terms of attracting attention and attracting Tai Butian's attention, that was his specialty. Tai Butian's group was waiting at the Tenli Pavilion outside Iron Cloud Citadel. When they saw Du Shiqing's carriage appear in the distance, they finally let out a sigh of relief. But then they were stunned. A person's shadow left Du Shiqing's group like an arrow and shot toward Chu Yang's direction. No, it was heading toward the city. It was getting closer and closer. Slowly, it turned from a small black dot into a small human figure. Then, in everyone's eyes, it turned into a black flash of lightning and rapidly approached. So fast. Next to Tai Butian, a burly man narrowed his eyes and couldn't help but praise in a low voice. Although the others did not say anything, they all had the same feeling. This figure did not ride a horse and was only walking, but his speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he had already reached a place not too far away from them. As he got closer, all the experts behind Tai Butian suddenly felt a chill run down their spines at the same time. Because at this moment, this meteor-like figure suddenly raised his head. Raising his head, he looked in Tai Butian's direction. 2 sharp gazes, like divine swords that cut through the dark sky, came slashing towards him. The dozens of experts behind Tai Butian felt their eyes being stared at by this pair of eyes at the same time. They felt as if they had nowhere to hide. It was as if they were stripped naked and placed in an endless snowy wasteland. At the same time, a cold aura that could freeze 1,000 miles swept over from the direction of the person in front. This cold aura seemed to be able to swallow the world. It was as if a calm sea had suddenly turned into a huge wave. The absolute tranquility had turned into an earth-shattering ruckus in an instant. This kind of strong contrast caught everyone off guard. Especially the guards on Tai Butian's side, they instinctively raised their guard to the highest level. Both sides were experts. Under the influence of their auras, they were on the verge of exploding. However, that person seemed to have realized something was wrong. He suddenly retracted his cold aura. This kind of ease of control shocked everyone to the extreme. At this moment, that person and Tai Butian's gazes were already on the verge of brushing past each other. Tai Butian unexpectedly turned her head to look. Their gazes seemed to have inadvertently met in midair. Suddenly, they both felt their entire bodies tremble. This seemingly inadvertent meeting of gazes was actually intentional by both of them. Moreover, only one side was well aware of this. Tai Butian had already activated the Emperor Divine technique before she raised her head. It carried with it a kind of supreme aura, accompanied by the icy heart-penetrating bone divine technique that she had cultivated since she was young. It was intentional, because with just one glance, Tai Butian had already sensed something. The speed, aura and gaze of this person before her all indicated that this person was definitely a dangerous person. If such a person was a friend, he would be a great help. If he was an enemy, he would become a terrifying enemy. Separated by several hundred feet, the two of them looked at each other. However, a strange feeling suddenly rose in their hearts at the same time. It was as if they were friends and enemies who should never have met and could never have crossed paths. At this moment, time and space had been distorted and they suddenly met. This feeling was especially obvious. At this moment, it was as if a mottled and fragmented time and space had appeared before his eyes. The two completely different worlds of his previous life and this life suddenly overlapped at this moment. This was an extremely mysterious feeling. This was a meeting that was completely outside of fate. Chapter 59. Tai Butian's glance looked ordinary, but it was the combination of the Emperor Divine technique and the Icy Heart Jade Bone Divine technique. He wanted to give the other party a feeling of invincibility and a feeling of, this person is a natural-born ruler. As long as this feeling was planted, it would be of great help to Tai Butian when he tried to recruit this person in the future. In the future, cooperation or recruitment between the two of them would be a matter of course. At this moment, Tai Butian naturally thought that the other party was just passing by. He was definitely not on guard against this glance. In reality, whether it was during a battle or a conversation, most people would pay attention to the other party's eyes. But who would have thought that the eyes could have such an effect? And Chu Yang's glance was, of course, even more deliberate. For this one glance, he even drew out all the cold air from the Seven Shades congregation grounds from the tip of the Calamity Sword. He used it as his own power to create an aura that could freeze 1,000 miles. He first gained the upper hand by a show of strength, then gathered his boundless arrogance to see through this one glance. Just this glance was bound to leave an indelible impression on Tai Butian. Chu Yang's gaze was calm and sharp, proud and wild, like the wolf king of the northernmost plains, sharp as a sword and cold as ice. In this pair of eyes, there was ruthlessness. In such a gaze, all living things in the world were ants that could be slaughtered. The heavens were like grass that could be trampled on. However, Tai Butian's eyes were gentle, warm, and tranquil without any ripples. In fact, it seemed as if he was overlooking the common people from the clouds. His lofty aura of a king spread along with the wind. Here I am the ruler. All the land under the heavens belongs to the king. All the people on the shores of the land are the king's subjects. One was intentional and the other was unintentional, but both of them gave it their all. This was a contest. But there was no winner in this contest. If Chu Yang's gaze was the waves, then Tai Butian's gaze was the reef. The waves rolled and swept up thousands of piles of snow. The reef stood tall and unmoving. Was it the reef that broke the waves? Or was it the waves that drowned the reef? Who could say for sure who would win and who would lose? But after this one glance, Chu Yang was like a gust of strong wind, brushing past Tai Butian's troops like a whirlwind. With a whoosh, he turned into a shadow and disappeared in the direction of the city gate. From the beginning to the end, the look in his eyes had never changed. Tai Butian also calmly retracted her gaze, deep in thought. It was as if this was just a coincidence. It was an extremely short meeting. In fact, even Tai Butian and the others treated this meeting as a coincidence. What a terrifying person. Behind Tai Butian, the dozens of experts who had gathered their powers to the maximum instantly heaved a sigh of relief. Their faces were solemn. Some of them even had cold sweat on the tip of their noses. A series of popping sounds came from under his feet. The power that he had gathered suddenly dispersed, and the ground beneath his feet actually cracked. Just now, when the cold air hit them in the face and froze them for 1,000 miles, everyone felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Although the other party didn't make any movements and was only flying, everyone felt as if a sharp sword was flying through the air. It was as if it was going to kill people with irresistible force and then fly away. Its momentum was unstoppable. A terrifying person? How terrifying is he? Tai Butian looked thoughtfully in the direction that Chu Yang had left in and asked slowly. This person, judging from his eyes and his aura, I'm afraid he's a top-notch executioner. Beside Tai Butian, a man in green took a breath and said in an intensely guarded tone, however, this person's motive is obviously not to. Because when he looked at you, there wasn't the slightest bit of murderous intent. There was only one kind of indifference. When he said this, the dozens of people around him suddenly fell into deep thought. Facing the Empress and such a grand ceremony, he's still so indifferent and dismissive. It's obvious how tenacious this person's nerves are and how great his composure is. However, even after searching through every corner of their minds, they still couldn't think of anyone in the martial world who was like this. This person was obviously very young, at most 17 or 18 years old. However, after thinking through all the young talents, they realized that there wasn't anyone who fit the criteria that this person had shown. Who was this person? Oh! A faint smile appeared on Tai Butian's jade-like face. She said softly, a terrifying person is also an interesting person. If he is not targeting me, then there is a high possibility that he is not an enemy. If he is not an enemy, then could he be a friend? Turning her head to look at Du Shiqing's carriage, Tai Butian said thoughtfully, that person just now seemed to be flying from Divine Dr. Du's direction? There was no such presence before, right? So his original position should be with Du Shiqing's group? Everyone looked at each other and couldn't help but nod. This point was very obvious. If such a master is with Du Shiqing's group, then Du Shiqing must know this person. Tai Butian said with relief, and the direction that this person is going is towards Iron Cloud Citadel? His eyes flashed and he sighed with a smile. How can we let go of such a talent? Send 2 people to see if they can follow him. However, no matter what, do not cause any conflict. The 2 people behind him nodded and left the group. They jumped on their horses and whipped their whips. With the sound of galloping hooves, they disappeared in the direction of the citadel gate. Tai Butian did not look back. She waved her sleeves and said, everyone, follow me to welcome Divine Dr. Du. Chu Yang brushed past Tai Butian like a whirlwind and disappeared into the distance. However, even after entering the citadel gate, the shock in his heart had not subsided. How could this be? Chu Yang was full of doubts. How could it be Icy Heart Jade Bone Divine Technique? How could it be Icy Heart Jade Bone Divine Technique? I am not surprised that he could use Emperor Divine Technique. This is a technique passed down from generation to generation in Iron Cloud Nation. But he clearly used Icy Heart Jade Bone Divine Technique to see through people's hearts. But Icy Heart Jade Bone Divine Technique was a secret technique of the Holy Clan. Moreover, the requirements to practice it were very special. Either it was a perverted and feminine man who practiced it, or it was a woman who practiced it to achieve the greatest effect. That kind of masculine man would not be able to cultivate this icy heart jade bone even in his lifetime. What Chu Yang found strange was that with Senior Bu Tian's power and status, what kind of technique could he not get? Why did he have to practice icy heart jade bone divine technique? But no matter what, this Senior Bu Tian of Iron Cloud Nation left a deep impression on Chu Yang. Especially those eyes. They were as clear as water, as cold as ice, but also gentle and calm. They contained the world and were unfathomably deep. But Chu Yang's deepest impression was that those eyes were so beautiful that they almost did not belong to this world. Chu Yang thought about it and could not help but laugh. Looking at this Senior Bu Tian's face, even though he was very handsome, wasn't he a little too effeminate? He was a typical pretty boy. Practicing icy heart jade bone divine technique did not seem to be anything special. Du Shiqing's carriage finally appeared in front of everyone. Manager Gao lifted the curtain, and Du Shiqing stepped out. Tai Budin took a step forward and bowed deeply. Senior Du, you must have traveled a long way. I am Tai Budin, and I am here to welcome you. His voice was clear and steady. Moreover, in front of Du Shiqing, he called himself this one, and did not refer to himself as this one, or Gu. This gave Du Shiqing enough face. From this, one could see how much importance this Senior Bu Tian placed on his father's illness. Your Highness is too polite. How could this old man dare to trouble your Highness to personally come and welcome me? I am very afraid. Du Shiqing hurriedly bowed. His face was a little emotional. Senior, there is no need to be so polite. As long as you can cure my father's illness, you will be the savior of all of Iron Cloud Nation. No matter what kind of treatment you receive, it is only natural. Tai Budin smiled and gently extended his hand. Senior Du, please. Du Shiqing said, Your Highness, please. Then he sat back in the carriage. Surrounded by people, he walked toward the city gate. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.